We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's pro football focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
And you just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam.
So,
who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season and all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo back here with Sam Monson. Sam, we're
What's up,
live
Steve?
on YouTube. We're back from the islands. Our faces are up, and
Yeah.
we're ready to go. Today, we're going to review the entire AFC free agency picture so far, and we're back with a bonus podcast tomorrow to go through the NFC. Sound good?
yep.
All right, let's get into it. By the way, free agency 30 is the promo code. 30% off all PFF subscriptions this week. 30% off. Free agency 30. Go crush it, because PFF Elite has added so many new stats to premium stats. Big time throws, big time throw percentage, the whole deal.
The stuff that everybody was asking for a long time. And usually us, because, you know, we're amongst the most front-facing members of PFF, and we talk about big-time throws and turnover-worthy plays quite a lot. So it's like, well, when am I going to get to see it?
Now you can follow along at home.
The answer is now. Now you can see it. It's in premium stats. If you've got Elite, you've got it. You've got it right now. You might need to refresh, log out, whatever it is, but it's there. It's there, and now you can see turnover-worthy plays and the rate. We start with the mailbag, just get it out of the way and tease the email address and all that kind of stuff, then we can get into free agency.
Go for it. I was going to actually let me segue quickly.
Okay.
We did have an astute email that I remembered it. I don't remember the name, but somebody did email and ask, now that we have turnover-worthy play percentage, I've noticed that a low percentage of turnover-worthy plays become interceptions. And it was a good catch. However, the reason for that is because turnover-worthy plays also include fumbles. So the turnover-worthy play number can't always be directly related to interceptions. It also includes fumbles in which we give bad downgrades to the quarterback. So it's not always apples to apples there.
Not all fumbles, just the ones where they're actually
right. Some fumbles are not necessarily the quarterback's fault or tough to avoid, but the ones where we say that's bad ball security will go down as a turnover-worthy play. So comparing turnover-worthy plays to interceptions is not always the cleanest way to go.
Yep.
All right. What you got for mailbag here?
So, mailbag. We have opened the mailbag to the people. NFL podcast, singular, at pff.com is our email address. Send us an email. Send us your musings, your thoughts, whatever it is you want to talk about. The better they are, the more we enjoy them. And if they're really good, we'll read them out in the show. And if we read one out on the show, we will give one subscription per week. Mailbag of the week. Mailbag letter of the week. Not mailbag of the week. So this is this week's by somebody called Brian Verbaken, I guess. Verbaken. Let's go with Verbaken. Hey, Steve and Sam. Thanks for taking our questions. I'd love to get your thoughts on my question, and if you've got the time, enjoy reading through the secondary benefits of the strategy. So the question is, how many more projected wins or EPA or WPA or whatever would a team add if they went for it on fourth down and the 2-point conversion every single time for an entire season? Right? Essentially, I forget this. So I'm not answering that one, right? I've decided to take the question, bastardize it for my own purposes, and come up with a slightly different one.
Yeah.
So that is not a good strategy necessarily, right? There's the dude in high school or whatever that just always goes for it, never punts. There are times where you should punt. There just are. There are times where it is the right decision to kick the points, to punt, whatever it is. I'm interested in what would happen if you just took the correct call every time. So everybody right now in the NFL has got something that shows them the data that says 4th down and whatever it is from the wherever, yes or no. Do you go for it? Do you not? What is the win percentage points? PFF has this data. We've been pushing it for a while. 2 teams. It's on broadcast, all this kind of stuff. So I'm curious, if you just did the thing that data tells you to do every single time, what would the results be? If you avoided the touchy-feely, gut instinct element of being the football coach and saying, well, momentum's against us, we got to get these points, whatever. And so apparently the answer to that is depending on the team, because obviously the situation and the alternative is important, right? It's not just that situation. Between 0.2 and 0.6 wins per team per season.
0.2 to 0.6 wins?
Right, which sounds like nothing, but if you're conversive in PFF's WAR,
I'm going to fire up PFF IQ.
That's worth a good player.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a significant movement in your win percentage over the course of a season.
Where'd you get that answer?
Don't worry about it. I know smart people.
Interesting.
So what do you got? Give me a player. What's the equivalent of that?
I'm just firing it up right now.
Fire it up.
Yeah.
I know the point. I mean,
it's like Quentin Nelson's in that range.
Yes. And I think Travis Kelce is in that range. Like, it's a good player depending on where in that situation it is.
So if you were 0.2 wins is a good defensive lineman.
Yeah.
Pretty good defensive lineman. 0.5 wins. We always talk about cornerback value here. 0.5 wins is Kyle Fuller of the Bears last year.
Okay.
Half a win. Marcus Peters, William Jackson.
There you go.
So William Jackson, our top free agent corner, was worth 0.49.
So you can go spend
wins.
happy in free agency and bring in a difference maker to your defense, or you could just make the right call every time during the season.
For a fraction of the price, you could buy PFF IQ, which gives you all of those.
Look at that.
It gives you our game management tool, which gives you all of those decisions.
Or, you can do both and get yourself a needle mover on defense and make the right call every time on the following season.
I'm throwing that into
double your mix.
I'm throwing that into our deck. The fact that, PFF IQ is equal to half a win just in the game management section, plus half a win with William Jackson. You get a full win.
There you go.
Right there. By the way, I was, you think you made a bad shirt decision, but somebody in the chat here, Jeff W, says Sam brought the A+ shirt game.
Yeah. So somebody mentioned a while ago that,
and then somebody else said, Sam, that shirt, dude. But he's a Vikings fan.
Yeah, somebody mentioned that I should, put on a shirt, dress up a little bit for the podcast, and I was browsing online, and this one, the picture made it look okay. I thought, all right, I can pull that off. I look a lot like a curtain.
Yeah.
Now, our curtains are pretty boring, but
which looks close to my Carson Wentz arm sleeve shirt.
But it feels like,
See, I think that'd be a better curtain. I like that. Producers.
I'm not in love with
Alyssa and Michael love that when you do that. I'm watching on the stream right there. That would be a good curtain. That actually does fit the.
But I mean, I don't think those two things combine well. I think
buy another shirt, put it in my size. We'll hang it up as a curtain.
If something would make a good curtain, I think it automatically doesn't make a great shirt. Is my point.
All right, let's get into AFC. We'll go team by team, or you just want to go through? Let's go through the big stories. Let's start with the Patriots. We did a whole PFF daily on this, winners and losers on Monday. You put them in the loser category.
I did.
So let's discuss that. New England Patriots, high-level view on what they did, a quick review on what they did. They signed everybody.
I can't decide if it's like this free agent period more than any others appears to be rife with some impressive degrees of water carrying by the insiders and people breaking news, clearly just conveying messages that are being given to them. Great move, outstanding player, and just feeding whatever agents or whoever it is feeding them information is giving them. It's always happened, I'm sure, to a degree, but this year it feels like they're just letting rip. Like whatever the message that arrives in my phone is, I'm just putting it out into the world. The number of people that are tying themselves in knots to explain how this Patriots spending spree is like vintage Belichick genius. 4D chess. This man amassed himself a war chest just for the time that nobody else had any money because the salary cap shrunk, so he could go out there and outspend everybody and crush free agency. You're like, no, stop it. I mean, come on. That's implausible to the point of farcical, and yet people are putting that out there as like a real thing, that this was a concerted strategy from the get-go. It isn't. This is evidence of a team whose roster has fallen to pieces and they need to go on a spending spree in order to recover before they even figure out who the quarterback is going forward. This is a clinic. Who is it? Somebody, Louis Riddick, I think, termed it a clinic in free agency. The only thing this is a clinic in is desperation.
Lewis said that?
Yes.
I'm shocked by that.
The only thing this is a clinic in desperation during free agency.
Well, so here's my take on the Patriots. It's not a clinic, nor is it they're losers. It's in between.
Fence sitter, huh?
I'm sitting on the fence because that's the answer here. We actually had a very astute, one of our listeners, one of our millions, who came and said, thank you for sitting on the fence every now and again. Not everything is super duper or garbage. But there's nuance to all of this. Are the Patriots better in 2021, Sam?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's the point. They're better in 2021. We're sitting here all last year. We're like, look, Cam Newton didn't play well, but who is he throwing to? For the second year in a row, guys don't get open. There's just no speed. There's no dynamic playmaker. There's nobody defenses fear. There's nothing. Mm-hmm. Now they have stuff. They've got two tight ends, Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. The two top tight ends on the PFF free agent board. They have both. They're both different style players. You got your true Y inline tight end in Hunter Henry. You got your move tight end in Jonnu Smith. Good. Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne. Bourne's not like a crazy speedy playmaker or anything. Pretty good receiver. Aguilar, I mentioned on New England TV last night, I said Patriots fans are either going to love or hate him. 5 weeks in, love or hate.
Right.
He's going to either have a couple key drops or he's going to become a deep threat that he was last year with the Raiders. I don't think there's much in between with him.
Interestingly, by the way, the tight ends are actually, by alignment, the opposite way around. Hunter Henry, over the last couple of years, has spent way more time in the slot or out wide than Jonnu Smith has.
Yeah.
But I don't disagree that actually might be the way around, that you would line them up as the Patriots. It's what it means, I think, is that both these guys are kind of interchangeable. Like, you can actually, unlike Gronk and Hernandez, which was very much a here's your inline tight end and here's your move tight end / guy that can go in the backfield because he's prohibitively bad as a blocker. Now you've got two guys, I think, that can both be either.
But those guys were interchangeable too. I mean, Gronk lines up in the backfield. He lines up out wide. I mean, so
yeah, but
the
it was
point
more
is
Hernandez was the limiting factor.
When I say Y tight end and move tight end, it's like if you have a two tight end set where they're both in line, Hunter Henry's on the line, Jonnu Smith is in motion. Like, that's the idea that they're going to move around. Absolutely. Josh McDaniels finally he wasn't creating mismatches with Matt LaCosse over the last couple of years.
So what is interesting, though, do you think this is related to the Patriots' complete and total inability to find wide receivers? That they've gone, you know what? Screw it. Let's go back to a two tight end system. Let's build this offense that nobody else in the NFL has right now, and we didn't even come close to having because we can't find wide receivers. We're not capable of finding four, which we need to do.
To a point, yeah. But I think
because that's the most interesting thing about the spending spree to me is that it does show a clear and obvious direction that they're going to. It shows a complete and total pivot in offense towards a two tight end system, which is pretty unique in today's NFL and a complete departure from what they've had in the last decade. And you only do that, I think, if you've completely made a balls of acquiring wide receivers over the last few years.
They were worse acquiring tight ends. Let's just back up a little bit. Rob Gronkowski, 2017, that was the last time he was elite, unbelievable good. 2018, they tried to trade him. It kind of felt like it could have been his last year. Wasn't, kind of lost his legs a little bit. They still win the Super Bowl. He retires at the end of the season. They had not prepared for that. They had the worst group of tight ends. Cam only threw 6% of his passes to tight ends last year, lowest in the league. Why? Because they were terrible. In 2019 and 20, probably the slowest team in the NFL. I think New England's offense, what they like to do is have options, different ways to win. And I think at a high level, what this has allowed them to do is to win games in different ways. Last year, when they won games offensively, it was those few games where they ran the ball really well, 200 yards, 250 yards. And Cam is a really good run threat. So now you have that option to win games. There are going to be some games, especially with this offensive line now. Trent Brown, Isaiah Wynn, Owenu, and Shaq Mason, like they have a power run blocking line. Mm-hmm. They're going to have some games where they overpower teams. They're going to have some games now where you have Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, Jacoby Myers to throw to. So they just have more options and flexibility. That is the crux of these moves offensively for the Patriots.
People have been saying for years that Bill Belichick will be the first guy to pivot to a different style of playing the game than everybody else in the NFL. Like, the league has been trending ever more pass happy. It's been getting smaller, faster on both sides of the ball, using spread systems, whether it's horizontally or vertically, attack space. And everybody's been saying for a few years now that somebody is going to pivot back the other way. Like, somebody is going to amass this power, old school football type of team and run riot because nobody is prepared to deal with that. And the Titans sort of did it a little bit with the exotic smash mouth or something that they call that thing.
Yep.
The Ravens have had something like that with Lamar Jackson in the run game that they've amassed. But I think this is the most concerted effort we've seen a team go all the way in that direction. Let's amass a bunch of road grading monsters up front. We'll get 2 tight ends. We'll get a quarterback that's a rushing threat. Although, it's still to be determined. I think if Cam is the week 1 starter, they still have a move to make there potentially.
Yeah, we got to discuss that as well.
But the Patriots are suddenly set up on paper to be a completely unique offense and have spent a lot of money to achieve that.
So there's 2 things we have to hit on here. First off, what I think the Patriots might do at quarterback, and then secondly, what the downside is to this entire thing. Okay, So the quarterback situation. I think because they've filled so many needs in free agency here. They're sitting at 15. They rarely sit at 15. And we're either going to see them sit pat and draft like a tackle, one of the offensive tackles because Trent Brown's probably not on the roster in the future. They're going to have this forward-looking approach, just like they drafted Nate Solder a year early. So old school Patriots, or they're going to get a QB. They're going to get one of those top 5. And if you're in the Patriots building, do you see a Trey Lance and say, we have a Cam-like skill set, we've got speed, he's a QB runner. He's a really good runner, unbelievable speed. He's got some work to do as a passer. We can redshirt him, whatever it is. Or do you see a Mac Jones? And I'll use my Orlovsky take here. If Tua thinks he's Tom Brady, and other people think he's Tom Brady, and you hear this, maybe somebody in the Patriots organization thinks, man, this is the closest thing we've seen to Tom Brady. Accurate, bad body. All that stuff. That's Tom Brady.
Really bad body.
Tom's got a good body now at 43, but coming out, he didn't. I mean, so first off, do you think they go make a move for a quarterback? I think at 15, they rarely pick this high. They are set up to go get somebody.
Yeah. The one thing that this spending spree does is keep their ammunition to execute a trade intact. And that is whether the trade is in the draft to go up in the first round or whether the trade is trying to acquire Jimmy Garoppolo or somebody like that. They haven't had to remove any capacity to do that by signing all these players. It also makes the environment a little more palatable for whatever quarterback is going to be coming in, or Cam Newton if they're stuck with that for another year. So I'm kind of on the fence. Just generally this notion of this volume of spending in a free agency period is typically bad. Now, you have to caveat that with the fact that it's usually done by very bad teams who need a lot more help. So it's usually going to be bad because bad teams have bad process, have bad talent acquisition. The whole thing is a descending spiral. If you suck, you probably suck because you haven't been able to acquire talent well in the first place. So going on a giant talent acquisition spree is unlikely to fix it because you didn't address the root cause of the problem, which is your inability to identify talent. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I don't know if the same thing is true with New England, which is, well, okay, if the Patriots, who have been good for 20 plus years, go on a spending spree, is the same thing true? Like, do they have the same failings as everybody else, that just bringing in this volume of talent at the same time is a bad, chemical makeup to a 53-man roster?
But it's almost like the necessary moves, too.
So this is the thing. The flip side of that is the roster was not in good shape and had been heading in the wrong direction for a couple of years now, so they had to do something. And we've been preaching the idea of, look, free agency is where you address needs, leaving you free to just take the best players in the draft. So I'm very much on the fence. I do.
Thank you. Welcome.
But I do inherently think that spending this much is just bad. It's not a good situation. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a bit like Dallas, right? The mistake you made was 2 years ago with the Zeke Elliott contract. At that point, there's no right. It's just which wrong decision, which wrong pathway are you heading down more? The one where you take the quarterback and just eat the fact that you've got a bad roster composition because of the Zeke Elliott deal, or the one where you try and reverse everything and let the quarterback walk and fix the whole thing from the ground up. I think the Patriots are in a similar situation. The roster's bad, so there's no correct fix. Do you spend a ton of money and try and fix it like with just huge amounts of players coming in, or do you say we've wrecked this? Like, let's destroy the whole thing. Let's bulldoze it. Let's start over from nothing and let's build this up the right way. I don't think either of those answers is good. They went with the one that involves spending all the money. We'll see how that works out.
Yeah, I mean, I view it in a somewhat simple manner, right? What you're looking for, where your current roster is and where your edge is, where your weakness is, and all that stuff. The edge the Patriots have right now is the cheap quarterback, right? So they either have Cam Newton in isolation making a $5 million base that can get up to $13 million. So let's say he's making $13 million. They either have him in isolation or they have Cam Newton plus a rookie quarterback. Either way, quarterback is cheap. They haven't had that for a while. Don't also forget that last year they didn't know that they weren't going to have Tom Brady necessarily. They paid Joe Tooney $14 million. They were cap strapped, right? And they kind of had to suck it up for a year and said, okay, this year we have more money. Cam Newton, if he's making $13 million, is making $8 million less than Teddy Bridgewater. He's in Ben Roethlisberger's making 14. There are about 20 quarterbacks in the NFL making more than Cam Newton. So the Patriots' edge is this rookie quarterback concept, right? Which is essentially Cam. So they can just go crazy. Now, where it comes back to bite them, the cap numbers in 2022 are going to look egregious at this time next year. Trent Brown, starting tackle, $15 million. They can cut him, and they're fine. So they could save that. But the guys that they just signed this year on the books, they're fine. They look, $6 million here, $8 million there. Next year's cap hits: Nelson Aguilar, 15. Hunter Henry, 15. Matthew Judon, 16.5. Jonnu Smith, 13.75. Jalen Mills, 6.1. Kyle Van Noy, 7.4. Devon Godshaw, 10.25. Dietrich Wise, 6.2. Kendrick Bourne, 5.7. Henry Anderson, 4.2. All of those guys that they just signed are making ridiculous money next year. So here's the downside to this whole thing. The Patriots get 2 wins better, 3 wins better. They go 10-6. They're still probably not a Super Bowl caliber team this year, unless they go on a run, obviously. So they go 9-7, 10-6. We're sitting here next offseason, and you're looking at this roster, and Aguilar had a nice year, and Hunter Henry and Jonnu had a nice year. But are they worth $15 million for all of these guys when there's a new crop of free agents and there's a bigger cap and there's even more money to spend and every other team's getting better? That's the downside to these moves. They're better this year. Long term, it might come back to bite.
The other thing is, we're going to, I think, get a good answer to the idea of how much of this mystique of New England being able to turn everybody else's trash into their treasure, how much of this actually still exists, and how much of it ever existed. How much of it was just Tom Brady being Tom Brady and turning whatever you gave him into magic. Like, this is a very New England group of players that they brought in. The money isn't very New England. Like, they've overpaid for a lot of these guys. But the players are very New England style of players. And if you go back like 5-10 years, you'd be like, oh, Henry Anderson's going to wind up being an absolute monster on the inside for this team, like disruptive playmaker. They're going to turn Jalen Mills into, Patrick Chung just retired. They're going to replace him with Jalen Mills, turn him into a superstar. Kyle Van Noy can only play well in New England. He's going to be a monster again. Everybody they've added, you're like, yeah, this is perfect. Does that still exist? Or did that ever exist? And was it just a product of Tom Brady making everything around him look better? As much as, I think everybody is still giving the Patriots a ton of benefit of the doubt. And the longer the departure between Tom Brady and the Patriots goes, the less I think they're deserving of that benefit of the doubt. And that it's going to be really interesting to see if they do manage to turn, or what percentage of this group they manage to turn into the sort of traditional Patriots superstar out of nowhere type thing.
A lot of hybrid players. I mean, I still think they're gonna get better. I think they're all gonna get better. Here's my question: what if Tom Brady was the quarterback of this roster?
Yeah,
Super Bowl contender, or I mean, I think we'd look and say, wow, he's got these couple tight ends to throw to. They finally have some receivers. We'll see what happens with Edelman if he can.
It would
still
be
run.
his best roster in New England since 2017.
Yeah, it absolutely would be. So yeah, fascinating to see the way. I think there's short-term gain in long-term question marks. So that's me right in the middle hedging for what the Patriots have done. But I think that's I think that's the take, fellas. That's it. All right, let's get through. We have all of the AFC to get through, but obviously not as many teams were that active or as active as the Patriots.
Let's go to the Jets because there's news.
Okay, what happened with the Jets here?
The Jets are apparently interested in Juju Smith-Schuster. They're in the market for another receiver, having already added Corey Davis to this group, Denzel Mims a year ago in the draft. That would get pretty interesting.
I don't love it.
Why not?
I look at Corey Davis, all Davis jokes aside, I completely understand what he is. And saying a guy is a number 2.
Future Hall of Famer?
I mean, with Zach Wilson, he probably will be now.
Of course, yeah.
Don't forget, I mean, Jerry Rice played with 3 teams. Seahawks legend.
Did.
Right? Randy
4.
Moss, 14. Who else was he?
Broncos, right? Right at the death?
Rice?
Yeah. I'm not imagining that, right? Jerry
I don't
Rice.
know. Randy Moss, 49ers legend. You know, he had to bounce around a little bit.
Yeah, but all those teams came in like the last 6 months of his career.
Yeah, fine. When I looked at this free agent board and I looked at projected salaries for receivers, we had Corey Davis and Juju Smith-Schuster just inside our top 30 in the initial free agent board.
I didn't imagine it. He did play for Denver, right at the death.
Broncos, Seahawks legend Jerry Rice. I looked at Corey Davis and Juju Smith-Schuster and said, okay, they're good receivers for what they are. I don't want to be the team paying them. Their projected salary was up at $13-14 million from Brad.
But Corey Davis was reasonably cheap.
Davis was cheaper than maybe expected, and the wide receiver market hasn't been great. I don't know that I want to be the team paying both of them, though. Both Corey Davis and Juju Smith-Schuster. Now, they need each other. They need other complementary pieces. And I don't know if I'm just being too skewed by the fact that Juju quite literally had Antonio Brown, who was a top 3 receiver at the time and was awesome, and Juju benefited from that. And Corey Davis had A.J. Brown, top 3 caliber type of receiver who he benefited from, and I can't just see beyond that. But I don't have evidence that Corey Davis or Juju is worth $10 million plus per year, and I don't have evidence, and I certainly don't think just putting them together, it gives you like wide receiver 1.5. So that's where I have some issues.
Davis was last year, right? Now, okay, you can debate how much of that was a product of A.J. Brown
and play action driven scheme. He was just the
sure,
guy.
But just
he
in
was open
terms
on a
of
bunch of over routes. But Corey Davis' skill set, he runs the vertical route tree really well. But he's not dynamic after the catch, and he's not a great downfield receiver, right? He's a short intermediate threat, gets open decent at that level, but there are limitations there. He's not a deep threat, and he's not an after the catch threat. So that, by definition, is like you're a complementary piece. We need somebody opposite him who either is a deep threat or is really good after the catch. So Jamison Crowder kind of fits that, but like Juju, I would describe him the same way as Corey Davis.
Yeah,
short and intermediate threat who's not scaring defenses.
True. So if you had a receiving core, because I think this would be at the cost of Jamison Crowder. Like if you brought in,
he'd have to be out.
If you brought in Juju, it would be Corey Davis, Juju, and Denzel Mims would be your trio. Jamison Crowder would be getting released on the basis that his contract is pretty sizable for a guy of his caliber and ability.
Stature?
That too. I don't think that's a bad receiving core, but it does, to your point, put a lot of pressure on Denzel Mims to be the guy that the others aren't. So Juju and Corey Davis are stylistically quite similar in terms of how they win, which would leave Denzel Mims being the guy that wins another way. And to his credit, he's got the ability to do that. He's got speed. He's got the skills to work on the vertical game and be a threat deep down the field. He's got dynamic run after the catch ability, but we haven't really seen it yet because he's been buried on a terrible offense with Sam Darnold as his quarterback. So I don't hate it. On paper, I think that's a nice trio. And if you're amassing weapons for a presumptive new quarterback, please don't let them run it back with Sam Darnold. If you're building this thing to plug a Zach Wilson or whoever into, I think that's quite a nice looking trio.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's just if those guys were all on rookie contracts, Corey Davis and Juju Smith-Schuster, I would like it, right? But I feel like they're at a point in their career where I know what they are. They're both going to be making over $10 million, right? Assuming Juju's going to be up in that 10 or 11 range. Maybe they get him a little bit on the cheap. They're not going to get worse at receiver.
But if that trio...
Same thing I'm going to say about the Patriots. A year from now, you're going to be like, the Jets' offense got incrementally better from a pass game standpoint. They still need more, and they have a lot of money tied up in Juju and Corey Davis.
Think of Mims, though, like the rookie contract quarterback. Like, if that trio is on the books for like $22 million a year, That's not bad.
Yeah, I guess.
Right?
It's fine.
So, okay, it's like sometimes you can offset what is not a bad contract, but an expensive contract or a luxury deal with something dramatically cheaper and just look at it as a net totality and think, yeah, it's actually not bad. Okay, maybe that's more in isolation than you would want to pay Corey Davis. But if you end up with Corey Davis, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Denzel Mims as your starting trio, on paper it looks pretty good. And if they come in at like $22, $23 million a year for the three of them, that's not bad.
No, I get it. Yeah, that's not bad. I guess I'm still looking for that really shiny object, but they're coming from such a position of weakness.
Yeah, and I also
at receiver.
I like and it also you can still draft one, right? But I also like the capacity of saying, look, finding a true elite number one X receiver is not that easy. If we get a bunch of guys that can all win, that's as good as you're going to do. I think that's a good starting point. And then if one of those guys falls into our lap, jackpot. But I don't think you should necessarily say, look, this team desperately needs a number one, so that's all we're focused on. Like, just get yourself 3 or 4 good receivers that can all win, and then figure out how to deploy them.
Yeah, overall, I mean, I like what the Jets are doing. So if they add Juju and Corey Davis, okay, you got a couple receivers there. That certainly has improved. You bring Marcus May back. Carl Lawson, we mentioned on the Daily today, was one of our we mentioned that we liked what the Jets did. Carl Lawson being a part of that. The Jets have not had an edge defender grade above 80 as a pass rusher in PFF history since 2006. So Carl Lawson primed to be that guy. It's a huge need in their system that relies on a 4-man rush. So, yeah, I like a lot of what the Jets have done. Jared Davis for 1 year up to $7 million.
Yes.
We don't know. Still could be just
that was a great example, by the way, of people like giving the positive agent spin. Oh, Jared Davis been used badly by the Lions. The league believes in him. They're going to put him in a different role, and you're going to get a great player. Come on, stop it.
Really absurd. It's really absurd. Just report the news, man.
Right.
Just report the news.
Why do you need to editorialize? I don't know why I'm asking that. It's rhetorical. I know why you need to do it, because those are the guys that are feeding you the information. So the quid pro quo is you post the pleasant thing about my player that I'm giving you, and I will give you the information about my player to put out there into the world in the first place. But it does get kind of tired when you're reading this crap, and it's like, come on. It's Jared Davis. We've all seen him play.
Let's wrap it up with the Jets. Next steps for them, though. I think if they do sign Juju. So, like, if they didn't sign Juju, I don't know if the receiver market's good in the second half of the first round. So, probably wouldn't be the play there. But tackle could be in play there to get a starting right tackle. Opposite Mekhi Becton, there's going to be starters there. So I could see them going Zach Wilson at 2, tackle in the 20s. Cornerback is still a massive need.
Yeah.
In a whole new system with Salah. I mean, that's going to be, they might go 3 corners in the draft that they need to look at, or some bargain basement free agents.
They're a team that should definitely not be done yet in terms of free agency. Like, they still have work to do. They still have money to spend. They should be active over this next week of sort of second wave of free agency and get some real bargains.
And you look, it's easy to get caught up in the Patriots signed 15 players. They're the winners. But the teams like the Jets, who we mentioned on the Daily, teams like the Seahawks, who we mentioned on the Daily, it's $6 million here, $8 million there, $13 million here, whatever. But it's just Carl Lawson, Corey Davis, a shot on Jared Davis and Juju. It's a few moves that were opportunistic, that all fit needs. I like it. I like where the Jets are. Mm-hmm. Has Miami done anything?
Yes. Not
Where's Miami?
Anything dramatic, but they've made a few moves.
Kyle Van Noy is out. They did trade Shaq Lawson for Benardrick McKinney. Now, Benardrick McKinney has been one of the, until last year before he got hurt, has been one of the better run stopping inside linebackers. That was a huge need for Miami. They give up Shaq Lawson, who's not a dynamic pass rusher or anything like that. So I like that move. And they signed Jacoby Brissett as a backup. I think Brissett has settled in as high-end backup. That's what he is. Signed Adam Butler. You got to get and Justin Coleman. So that's 3 former Patriots as I talk it out.
New England South.
Wow. But they got rid of Kyle Van Noy, so that
Butler's a nice pickup. Coleman is confusing to me. I don't understand why Justin Coleman would want to be in this scheme. In his career, he's been reasonably bad in New England, very good in Seattle, and then atrocious in Detroit. Now, New England and Detroit run variants of the same defensive scheme. Miami runs a variant of that same defensive scheme. If I was Justin Coleman, I would want to play anywhere other than that defensive tree. Anywhere. And yet, he signed on voluntarily to go to Miami. Now, it's a 1-year, $2.75 million deal, which might suggest that he didn't have many alternatives. But that in and of itself is kind of surprising to me because the play that he had for 2 years in Seattle was really good and encouraging. And like there was a period where we were talking about him as the best slot cornerback in the NFL. I don't get that signing for pretty much anybody concerned.
Is that a bit of a knock on Noah Igbenogany, first-round pick last year?
Can't be an endorsement, right?
Because outside you've got Xavier Howard and Byron Jones. Igbenogany looked like the perfect complement there. Good man coverage skills, slot corner, 37 grade as a rookie.
Yeah.
Justin Coleman, yes, coming into a similar scheme. They're just hedging a little bit on Igbenogany and his development.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate the Dolphins bringing in another player that can, as you say, hedge and provide an insurance plan at slot corner. I don't know if that's the one I would have picked, given his history within that scheme. And for him, as I say, I don't understand why he would want to go to that scheme either. Igbenogany got lit on fire early in the season, but he got thrust into like starting action because everybody was injured and was getting like roasted alive by Stephon Diggs like a couple of weeks into his NFL career. That dude just got thrown into the fire, and I don't think he was even supposed to be playing much year one. And in like last year, all the rookie cornerbacks were toasted. You've got to assume he's going to be better, but it's tough to know what to do with any of those rookie players because like
such a weird year.
The Jeffrey Okudah was as bad as any cornerback in the NFL, but was one of the cleanest prospects we've seen coming into the league. What do you do with that going into year two? Now, the Lions have some room because, hey, we've changed scheme and we expect everybody to be better. But a lot of teams that had high-round rookie cornerbacks last year are in a tough spot relying on those guys going into year two where you expect them to be good.
Dolphins going 1 year, $2.75 million for Justin Coleman. I'm okay with it. It's fine. Keep taking shots.
I'm okay with it for them. It seems a curious player to want to bring in given his experience within that scheme. Like I get that he's familiar with it, but the familiarity is bad. He hasn't played well in that scheme and has been dramatically better in other schemes. So it's cheap. I understand it, but it is not a move that makes sense to me.
Quick break to tell you about our friends over at Mint Mobile. After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, there's always a catch. So when I first heard about Mint Mobile offering premium wireless service at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch, Sam? But after speaking to them and using their service, it all made sense. I know you guys have used it over in the Monson household. There isn't a catch at all. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. How's that going for you guys?
It's going good. I mean, it's the same phone service as you would use anywhere else, only it's a hell of a lot cheaper. I mean, that's the bottom line. They don't waste money on all the other crap that everybody else is using. They're just cheaper mobile service, and it's exactly the same. Therefore, it's great.
It's great. For people looking for extra savings, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. And if you're not 100% satisfied, Mint Mobile has you covered with their 7-day money-back guarantee. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/PFF. That's mintmobile.com/PFF. Cut your wireless bill to just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/PFF. Let's go to the Buffalo Bills, staying in the East here.
Well, hang on. You forgot to mention that the Miami Dolphins acquired a first-round talented tackle, traded for Isaiah Wilson. A 2021 seventh-rounder.
As bad as Isaiah Wilson's 3 QB kneel-down snaps were in Tennessee.
Don't forget there was a fourth, was it a fake punt or something? He was in there for something else.
I like to think that they acquired a third-round talent, which is what he was.
Okay.
A third-round talent for a throwaway 7th-round pick.
Yes. I do, yeah.
Worth it.
Rolling the dice is fun. I do like the comedy, though, of a guy that was partying himself out of the league in Nashville going to South Beach. That'll work out well.
Look, he's learned.
You think?
Learned his lesson.
Yeah? He's on the straight and narrow now? We're good?
Sure hope so. Isaiah Wilson. He was overdrafted anyway, just from a talent standpoint. All right, let's get to the Buffalo Bills. I think the unexciting status quo. Look, it's tough. It's tough to maintain a good roster. But I think where they lost, they also gained, right? So they cut John Brown. They bring in Emmanuel Sanders. You're not getting the same speed or dynamic downfield threat. You're getting a really good route runner. Sanders is still one of the best in the league at getting open against single coverage. They kept Darrell Williams at right tackle. That was huge. Now they keep together one of the best tackle tandems in the league in Deion Dawkins and Darrell Williams. And they keep Matt Milano. He is a very good complement to Tremaine Edmonds, covers backs well out of the backfield. So you have that. I think just roster maintenance. They re-signed John Feliciano.
Yeah.
That's okay. It gives them some flexibility in the draft so they don't have to force a guard at the end of the first round like some people were talking about. I think overall it's just tread in water for the Bills, which is fine given where the roster is.
Yes, their business was maintaining what they had and making sure they didn't lose a dramatic amount of the roster that was so good this year. Re-signing Milano, re-signing Darrell Williams, who is, I think, a player that's probably underrated. He has a lot of bad on his resume, but almost all of it comes at positions other than right tackle. When he's played right tackle for a whole season, he's been good for 2 years. And so I think signing him, re-signing him, making him your right tackle is good business. And then re-signing John Feliciano, making sure that your offensive line stays intact and that one of your defensive leaders is there. I think that was all great. You made a point yesterday that I think was interesting and is borne out by a lot of teams, that NFL teams hate injuries. They hate players that get injured.
Yeah.
And even if it's not their fault or indicative of any kind of, there are injury-prone players, right?
Yep.
And it's a sad reality of the world that some guys are just more brittle than others, and they're going to break, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you are probably wise to steer away from as many of those players as humanly possible because you're going to get burned. That being said, there are also players that just get hurt, and it's a fluke, and it happens, and then those guys get healthy, and you move on. But it seems that the NFL takes it personally. And when you get those guys, they are always looking to move on from them as quick as humanly possible. So John Brown got cut and replaced by Emmanuel Sanders. I don't think that's a positive move. I think it's not bad mitigation of a loss. Like bringing in Emmanuel Sanders, having lost John Brown, I think is good. But if that was like the conscious decision, hey, we can get rid of this guy, bring in this guy, and we're good, I think it's a step back. John Brown did bring something unique to that offense that I don't think they ever were good at replacing. When he wasn't in the lineup, they didn't just plug in Gabriel Davis and not skip a beat. They didn't just ask Stephon Diggs to run more of the John Brown routes. They were missing something from that offense. It wasn't ever quite as dangerous as when they had John Brown in the lineup. So to voluntarily move him on, potentially because he'd missed some time injured, I just think is a questionable move.
So on the other end of the spectrum is the Raiders pick him up on the cheap.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Raiders, they go from Nelson Aguilar, who signed the massive contract that we just said, 2 years, $22 million, split over 2 years, right? And they get a 1-year flyer on John Brown to essentially replace Aguilar. So, yeah, maybe there's some injury risks, say, that Buffalo, and money for Buffalo as well. But that's a great move for the Raiders. And that's if you're going to call the Patriots losers, going back to them a little bit, you would just find what comparable players made on the market. So you could look at the Patriots move and say, why are you going to pay Nelson Aguilar when John Brown made a quarter of that? Why are you going to pay Matthew Judon when, say, a Hassan Reddick made, was 1 year, $6 million? And it's not always apples to apples, but it's where's the market for all these various players? And the Patriots may be overpaying for a whole bunch of players. Yes, you lock them in, but you overpaid for a whole bunch of players when there's the old Patriots would get this guy for a year and this guy for 2 and this guy for $6 million. And it's that's the part of the Patriots stuff that's different.
I also think that their general trend of overpaying for players is indicative of how much of the old Patriot way was Tom Brady. Like, people used to go to New England on a fairly cut price deal to chase a Super Bowl ring. That isn't a thing anymore. You go to Tampa Bay to chase a Super Bowl ring. Tampa Bay had to retain half a dozen players this offseason and retain them all easily.
Because they wanted to run it back.
They want to run it back and get another Super Bowl ring with Tom Brady as their quarterback. Wasn't the problem. That used to be the draw for New England every single offseason. You used to be able to get players that other teams couldn't attract for a cheap deal because they knew that you could chase a Super Bowl ring. They don't have that luxury anymore, so they actually have to pay for them, and they might have to overpay for them because they don't have an obvious answer at quarterback.
Let's go to the AFC North here. Baltimore Ravens, a team that we've mentioned on a few different shows here. It's similar, right? Just similar to the Jets, but for less money, I would say, just under the radar moves to fill a few needs. Kevin Zeitler gets released by the Giants. The Ravens pick him up. The Ravens have been one of the most astute teams when it comes to compensatory picks. This is one of those moves when you sign a guy that's been released and isn't a free agent, isn't going to go against your compensatory pick formula. So that's a guy, sure, you pay him whatever, right? And it's not going to hurt you as far as getting those extra draft picks. They're very astute there. So Zeitler helps an offensive line that needed interior offensive line help. And then Derek Wolfe gets re-signed. Yeah, Derek. And then here's the move I like. Tyus Bowser, guy they drafted a couple years ago, second round. Maybe he hasn't been as big, made as big of an impact as you would like from a second round pick. But for a Matthew Judon replacement, a guy that if we talked about Matthew Judon getting schemed up pressures, Tyus Bowser, pretty athletic guy that can also take advantage of those schemed up pressures, drops into coverage pretty well. He's dropped into coverage 86 times 2 years ago, 155 times last year. Ravens type of player. And if we're talking about Judon making a ridiculous amount of money and Bowser comes in at $5.5 million per year on a 4-year deal, that's great. That's good business right there too. Just continue to cycle through these young edge rushers.
Yep, agreed. I would like to make a point on the Derek Wolfe thing. So we tweeted out,
tell the people what's happening.
I am. I'm explaining it, Steve. The PFF account tweeted out something like Derek Wolfe re-signed, had a PFF grade of 68.2 last year, ranked 39th amongst interior defensive linemen. Now, Derek Wolfe is one of those players that's always had a bug up his ass about PFF for years. Randomly, like 5 years ago, he suggested that we took like cash for grades. And he's one of those players that generally the people that have a real problem with PFF are the ones that aren't grading great at the time. And at the time, Derek Wolfe wasn't grading that great. So anyway, 39th. Now, the first point to make is that's not a bad place to be. There's 64 on average starting defensive interior linemen at any one
Probably
time.
100 guys that qualify.
Yeah, and in fact, more than that, right? Because you still got some teams that, whatever. Anyway, there's a lot of those guys, right? Being 39th in the league at that position is not a bad place to be. But evidently, Derek Wolfe thinks he's better than that. So he was bitching, replied to the main account that, don't do me a favor and don't grade my games for now. The only grade that matters to me is my coach's grade, right? I would make the point that Derek Wolfe was the 39th graded interior defensive lineman, just re-signed a contract with Baltimore that makes him the 40-something best paid interior defensive lineman in terms of average per year, right? Which is what NFL players use to compare themselves. That's why Trent Williams is getting paid $10,000 a year more than David Bakhtiari on average, because they just want to be one up. Which
in reality has him lower than 39th because you have a bunch of guys on rookie contracts.
Correct.
Who can't make that much money.
Yes, which means that the only grades that he cares about, his individual coaches, apparently value him about the same, if not a little bit less than we do, which is still a nice place to be, but shut the hell up, is my point.
Seconded.
Thank you. Anyway, next.
Cincinnati Bengals in the AFC North. The Trey Hendrickson deal. So they replace Carl Lawson with Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah.
The deal they're not that locked into him though, right?
Yeah, it's structurally. So the Bengals free agency is often about what's the cheapest way of doing this, which is fine, I guess, but it feels like at some point you need to spend some money. And not just like overall, like the total dollar figures that are often reported, but like structure it in the same way as other people. Like give the guys the big money year one because you're going to get a greater amount of player. You're going to get more player for your money if you structure it in a way that benefits them. If you're confident in your evaluation, why not do that? They still appear to be trying to just sort of cheap this thing out and not have to pay cash up front.
I'm just saying it's reported as a 4-year, $60 million deal. It's $16 million fully guaranteed. It's not a bad hedge for a guy where we called Trey Hendrickson overrated overall because of the sack totals and all that stuff. He had a 77 pass rush grade last year, which is still very good. That is Shaq Barrett territory. Shaq Barrett has been in that high 70s, low 80s pass rush grade territory. The problem with Hendrickson is he'd only done it for 1 year. If you get another year of that out of Hendrickson, and he lands at 8 sacks or 9 sacks or 5 sacks, whatever it is, but it's a 77 pass rush grade, that's still pretty good. So I don't hate it as bad as it looked on paper. And I thought there were 2 moves in the secondary, Chidobe Awuzie and Mike Hilton, they essentially paid the same money for those two that they would pay for, say, one William Jackson, which I think in theory is good business. Awuzie has the classic number 3 starting pitcher, Sam, just your league average corner. And Mike Hilton has been one of the better slot corners.
I like Hilton. I think that's a really good pickup. The Trey Hendrickson point, right? Just don't judge him by sacks. If you're looking, only TJ Watt had more sacks amongst edge rushers last season. So if you're looking at him saying, oh, this guy had whatever it was, 14 sacks, he's going to be amazing, he's one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, you are wrong. He had 14 sacks, second in the NFL amongst edge rushers in sacks, 21st in terms of total pressures. So that's, again, 21st is good. It's a good place to be, particularly when there were players that had more pass rushing opportunities than Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't move much higher when you look at it on a per snap basis. But the point is, that's where you need to think of him as. Just look at pressures, PFF grade. They put him in the same kind of ballpark. He's good, not great. He's in that Shaq Barrett territory. Now, you can look at it and say, there's potential for him to be better. Maybe he'll become a Shaq Barrett where he takes a step forward with an increased role. But just don't give me the sack number and be like, he's one of the best in the NFL. Because he isn't. He's good, not great. But the Trey Hendrickson move is interesting because, one, you can look at it and say, well, he's overpaid because somebody's gone after the sack totals. But two, when you look at the structure of the deal, it isn't the fact that he's overpaid. It's actually that they kind of cheaped out to take a Trey Hendrickson when you could have just retained a Carl Lawson for potentially a bit more money, but he's a better pass rusher, even if the sacks don't say it. So the whole thing, again, feels like Cincinnati just looked at this and said, what's the cheapest way of getting a half-decent pass rusher? It's Trey Hendrickson. Let's go. And I at some point, have stronger ambition than that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Lawson would have been a better fit for them. I'm intrigued to see what Hendrickson does because, again, we liked him come out of college. He did have this peak year last year. We'll see if he can keep it going. Awuzie and Hilton should make them better in the secondary. Awuzie has been up and down in his career, though. So, he's a better zone player than man. So if they protect him a little bit in more zone concepts, he's not bad. They're about they're about in the middle of the pack. Man zone splits in Cincinnati, so it's okay.
Larry Ogunjobi.
And Larry Ogunjobi there too. 1-year deal. He's
chasing that 1 year that he had right at the start of his career.
Yeah, he's just gone in reverse, man. He looked like a really good run defender early in his career. That's gotten worse every year. His pass rush grades have stayed pretty static. You've got him and DJ Reader now on the interior, a couple of guys that they have signed over the last couple of years. So there's a lot of what ifs, I think, on that Bengals team. Reminds me of the Raiders a little bit last year, the last couple of years, rebuilding their defense with some veterans, and the Bengals, they need these guys to hit pretty much. Cleveland Browns, another team that's done, as I'm looking at the PFF free agency tracker, they've done 4 things, and I think they're all good moves. I mean, they cut Adrian Claiborne. I'm not saying that's a good move. Cut Adrian Claiborne. They signed John Johnson, one of the top safeties on the market. That was where they decided to spend their money. I think that was the right play.
Yes.
The trickle-down effect to the rest of that secondary.
Free agency.
Yeah. The trickle-down effect with Ronnie Harrison in the secondary, with Grant Delpit, so much more flexibility back there now. I still think there's another corner to target out there because just as Greedy Williams insurance, in Denzel Ward insurance too. We talk about Denzel Ward and injuries stuff. So continue to get more corners, but Johnson adds some range and some box playing ability back there too.
That's one of the best moves in the entirety of free agency. We talked on our preview that there's a ton of really good safeties hitting the market even after the franchise tag was used fairly liberally on them. What was that going to do to the market? Was it going to depress them, make them all cheaper than they would ordinarily be? Turns out the market overall, I think, has been depressed because of this salary cap crunch. So the fact that there is less money to go around, combined with the fact that there's a ton of availability for high-level safeties, means people are signing these guys for really not much money. And, when you compare the top end of the market, the Budda Baker kind of contracts, to John Johnson signing for 3 years, $33.75 million, it's a freaking bargain. Like, he's one of the best safeties in the NFL. Every single year of his career that he's been healthy, he's got a PFF coverage grade above 80. That's really hard to do.
Really good, yeah.
I think that's just a phenomenal move and a great fit for that defense.
And then high upside type of plays. Takaris McKinley, 1 year, $4 million. Sometimes you get that former first round stigma. So you either get the stigma and people don't want you, or you get I'm going to find the best out of Vic Beasley for $10 million a year, whatever it is. Taking Takaris McKinley, who's pretty much had a consistent 65 pass rush grade every single year. You just kind of know what you're going to get. For $4 million, that's fine. That directly replaces Adrian Claiborne. And then Rashard Higgins, man, 1 year, $2.38 million to be your third wide receiver.
Let's go.
I mean, look, Higgins has been extremely productive. And again, comparing it to the Aguilar deal in New England, last year, look at their production, man. It's similar production. Aguilar was better. Similar production, though. Now you're getting that at a fraction of the cost. This is good roster management by the Browns.
Agreed. Yeah, I think this is smart business across the board. That's a good set of moves. Again, they haven't done a ton, but this has been a really nice start.
All right, quick break to tell you about our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. This is an incredible deal here because if you like fantasy football and you like playing fantasy for money, you need to check out Underdog Fantasy. Underdog's got everything, including season-long and playoff best ball. Best ball is a season-long game where you draft a team just like you normally do, but that's it. There's no in-season roster management. Underdog automatically selects your best performers each week, saving you loads of time. Now, here is the catch, Sam. The catch is this is an unbelievable deal because you go to Underdog Fantasy and you deposit $10 using the promo code PFF. That's right, just $10. Promo code PFF. And I can't believe we're doing this, but you get a free PFF Edge annual subscription. Promo code is PFF. You get 365 days of access to PFF Edge, which includes the red-hot PFF draft guide right now, and it's only $10 over at Underdog Fantasy. Go draft right now. Underdog Fantasy, promo code PFF. We got one more team in the AFC North here. Pittsburgh Steelers. It's hard to get excited about where the Steelers roster is going, Sam.
Yeah.
This felt inevitable. It was difficult to keep everybody. They had some cap issues, but we're seeing the offensive line just has massive question marks now.
Yep.
You lose a Juju, so you still kind of feel like you need more
Presumably.
playmakers, presumably.
Villanueva, presumably.
You lose Bud Dupree.
Bud Dupree, definitely.
Replace him with Alex Highsmith. I think it's essentially the Steelers need the youth. They need young guys to step up. Zach Banner to step up, who they signed to play starting right tackle, presumably. Still have a question mark at center and left tackle in Pittsburgh. And still with Banner at right. He's played okay when he's been out there.
Have a question mark at every spot instead of right guard, except right guard.
Yeah. Kevin Dotson played well, limited time. They need the youth to step up, and Steelers fans are still banging the drum for like a first-round running back, but that's a whole separate story.
Oh,
the running back's not fixing this situation. So,
no.
Thoughts on the Steelers?
I mean, they've basically done nothing. They re-signed Ray McLeod and Zach Banner, which are two small pieces of a roster that is in decline and needs fixing. It's still early. Like, free agency opened yesterday, for real. Okay, it's been like legal tampering for a couple of days before that, but there is still time for them to do things and make additions to this roster that are pretty necessary. You would expect Bud Dupree being replaced with Alex Highsmith. I think that's actually an okay move. They're going to be fine there. The offensive line is a major question mark, particularly when Ben Roethlisberger is still your quarterback and didn't play well. Like, Ben Roethlisberger is heading in the wrong direction. If ever you needed an offensive line to be at the peak of its powers, it would be heading into this year with your quarterback on the decline. But actually, it seems like that's going south as well. And the defense is too talented for this team to just completely collapse. But there are some worrying signs that, like, that is a possibility that could certainly be on the table unless they have a really good draft.
Yeah, I mean, there's 10 to 15 teams in the league where you say, okay, they're really dependent on the draft. And the Steelers are absolutely one of them.
Which is not a good place to be.
No.
Conceptually.
Yeah, and again, Mike Renner, 2-for-1 drafts.
They picked 24th.
Right. And Mike Renner from 2-for-1 drafts makes this point all the time. Like, not only I've made this point for years too. You don't go into the draft with needs, but it's just the concept of, like, man, we really need contributions from 4 draft picks this year.
They're in
not just needs, but like legitimate contributions. That's a tough place to be in. If you get it, great.
It's a very similar spot to the Vikings last year, where it's like you need 2 or 3 starters to come out of this draft and be good.
Yeah.
And they got all-pro play out of Justin Jefferson, and they still didn't bat over 500 on that. Like, you got Justin Jefferson, you were starting Jeff Gladney, you were starting Cameron Dantzler. Dantzler played well down the stretch, but you needed those 3 players and more, to be honest. But you needed those 3 players to come in and be really good right away, just to tread water over what you had the season before. That's kind of the situation the Steelers are in. They're going to need 2 or 3 draft picks to come in and play well in year 1 just to keep their head above the water. And that is just such a small target to be trying to hit.
Yeah, I've heard people, Big Ben restructured. He's worth about $14 million this year. I mean, I think I've heard people criticize that, like, oh, you can't roll it back with him. Fine. But I think if you're going to give it one more shot, you're going to hear me say this 900 times before the start of the season. Let him go.
I mean, if he
let him chuck it down the field, and you have to play high variance football, I think, because they played low variance football last year, trusted their defense, and they got to a fake 11-0 or whatever it was, and then fell apart. Back to reality. They need to play a high variance game and just hope they hit lightning in a bottle. They either go 6-10, or you stumble into 10-6 and maybe make it to the playoffs. I feel like that's how the Steelers have to approach this year.
Yeah.
Football teams don't necessarily do that, but I think that's where they are from a roster standpoint.
I mean, if Roethlisberger wasn't going to retire, they didn't have much of a choice in terms of what they were going to do. They needed to restructure and free up some cap space just to get under the cap. They're stuck with that. Like, Roethlisberger is their quarterback. They don't really have an alternative. They just need to desperately hope that they get high-end play from a couple of sources.
All right, let's go AFC South. It seems like we love you guys, all of our listeners. It seems like you guys like when we go team by team. You guys really enjoyed our Fixing Every Team in 5 minutes series. So that's why we're trying to give every team, every team some love. The Jaguars have done a lot of stuff. Some I like, some I don't necessarily love, but they've brought in a whole bunch of players. This was a team we expected to spend a lot of money. What do you think about the Jags as a whole from a free agency standpoint so far?
As you said, it's a mixed bag of signings. Does it speak to you with a coherent strategy, or does it just say we didn't have a great roster, let's just start throwing things at it and see what sticks?
The thing I struggle with that is we have a different perspective of players, right? Because every team evaluates players differently. I imagine in the Jaguars building, there's a list of 100 moves that they've made, starting with placing the franchise tag on Cam Robinson. I imagine in their building, they're like, okay, we placed the franchise tag on Cam Robinson. He's a starting tackle. We retained a starter, right?
Yes.
They signed 3 interior defensive linemen, or traded for 1 as well. We like that move because it's like, all right, there's 3 half-decent players. Roy Robertson-Harris, Tyson Alualu returns to Jacksonville, and they trade for Malcolm Brown. Brown's an excellent run defender, as is Alualu. Robertson-Harris has shown flashes. He's size and upside guy. Okay, so from our perspective, we like that. I imagine the Jaguars like every last one of these moves. Dwayne Smoot, backup edge defender, but 2 years up to $14 million, maybe too much. Philip Dorsett, high upside, deep threat, great. Carlos Hyde, why? Don't even need that. So our perspective is good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. That'd be my take. Rayshon Jenkins is the big question for me. The safety coming from the Chargers, who's just been an okay player, making 4 years. $35 million over 4 years.
Over the last 2 years, would you like to know who has given up the second most total pressures in the NFL amongst tackles?
Is it Cam Robinson?
It is. Would you like to know who's given up the most pressures among tackles?
It's not Jawan Taylor, is it?
It is Jawan
Jaguars
Taylor,
starting
yes.
right tackle.
So the Jaguars starting tackles, one of whom they went out of their way to retain, have collectively given up the most pressures in the NFL. 85 for Cam Robinson, 99 for Jawan Taylor.
Let me give you the analytical argument for Cam Robinson.
Do it, because I'm interested in
the
this
football argument for Cam Robinson is he hasn't been healthy since 2014, guys. Once he's healthy, he'll be fine. That's
healthy or good.
That's what the people tell me.
Quite a critical part of that as well.
That's what the people tell me. He hasn't been healthy since 2014.
Okay.
He's got traits. Or people think he's actually been good. Here's the reality of Cam Robinson. He has been a below-average pass blocker, a below-average run blocker. He has one of the highest percentages of negatively graded plays in the run game in the league. You mentioned all the pressures he surrendered. Cam Robinson has been not good. The analytical move for bringing him back, at least on a 1-year deal, is comparing him to other tackles with a similar profile. This is where my friend PFF IQ comes in, and I could compare him to, there's 2 guys that come to mind. Eric Fisher of the Chiefs, 4 years of meh, and then he became a league average tackle. And then Donovan Smith, I think, is the closest proxy for Cam Robinson over the last few years. So I compared Cam Robinson and Donovan Smith in years 3 and 4, and I stacked them up side by side, and I said, okay, where do they rank? Cam Robinson, 29th percentile pass blocking grade. Donovan Smith, 32nd, almost identical. Pass blocking grade with no play action, 27th versus 34th, almost identical. The one place they were different, Donovan Smith was really good in pass blocking grade on true pass sets, which is the best indicator of pass blocking prowess. Donovan Smith was actually about middle of the pack. Cam Robinson is 20th percentile. They were also both among the worst run blockers as far as avoiding negatively graded plays, which is the most stable tackle metric. So the point is, Donovan Smith, since that point, has gotten better. He's become pretty much a league average type of tackle. You mentioned to me the other day, when it's bad, it's ugly. Cam has some of that too. So the argument for him is there's a history of a few guys around the league with 3 or 4 years of experience who go from below average to average in year 4 or 5. And again, I don't know that these conversations are really being had in NFL front offices. They should be. This is the type of conversation where it's not like, I got a big, tall guy with long arms and good traits. That's not why you re-sign Cam Robinson. You re-sign him because guys with a history of a little bit of below average play can take a next step in year 5. And doing it with a 1-year contract is okay. Now, overall, I don't know if I want to incur that risk. And I would perhaps mitigate that by drafting another tackle, maybe with my second first-round pick. Does that all make sense?
Yes. Certainly the argument they put out publicly was just that they think Cam Robinson is better than you do, or we do. Everybody does. They made the same kind of argument that the Bengals made about Bobby Hart, who, by the way, ranks 3rd on that list of the most pressures given up over the last 2 years.
And he's missed some time.
Yes. Bobby Hart, who we were reliably informed by the Bengals, plays really hard. He's good. I watched all of his tape, and it was actually really quite good. We're fine with Bobby Hart as our starting right tackle. Bobby Hart is a bad right tackle. I don't know what tape you're watching to make you come to that conclusion, but either you're watching the wrong tape or you're not documenting it correctly because you're coming to an incorrect conclusion. This is kind of the same thing with Cam Robinson. It's like, look, trust me, you go back to his college tape, I can understand within 5 plays why people love Cam Robinson. Within 5 plays on any tape, you will see a play that makes you go, okay, this guy's got amazing movement skills. He's got strength. He's got power. He's got the ability to make all these plays. And then 5 more plays, you will see why it never actually happens. You're like, oh, yeah, okay. So if you're only looking at the tape and just looking at traits or viewing it through that lens, you can easily come to convince yourself that Cam Robinson is a good player. You need to actually document what you're watching and how often he's getting his ass kicked and how often he's losing, because that's the relevant part of the information, and that's where he falls down. So I would agree with you that I think you can convince yourself that, hey, there is a trend of some of these guys taking a big step forward quite late into their careers, and it's worth taking a shot that this happens for Robinson. It's bad process if you're just looking at him and thinking he's already there, and it's better to have him in the building than not, which sounds like the way they've gone.
Yeah, guys, free agent tackles that are still available that had a higher pass blocking grade, not only last year, but over the last few years. Ali Villanueva. So again, we're trying to protect Trevor Lawrence here.
Yeah.
As a rookie. Ali Villanueva would upgrade. Russell Okung would upgrade. Kelvin Beachum, I know he's been playing right tackle. Marvin Jones signed at receiver for the Jags. I like a lot. I'm a Marvin Jones fan. Contested catch guy. He's really good at the catch point. When I watch Trevor Lawrence play, he gives guys opportunities. He's a good back shoulder guy. He's a good just chuck it up and let him go. That's why I said I'd love to see Allen Robinson return to Jacksonville. But I think Marvin Jones, DJ Chark, and Laviska Shenault, if that's the trio in year 1, and it kind of pushes Laviska down the depth chart a little bit to see how he develops and maybe can be used on more gimmicky type stuff, I like that a lot. Because Laviska has potential to improve, but I want to take a little pressure off him, in the meantime. So I like that.
Yeah. I'm interested in the moves they've made at cornerback as well. Shaquille Griffin, re-signing Sidney Jones, who was quietly quite good last year, having been basically a bust.
He was their only guy that showed up for a few games last year.
Yeah. Now you have a trio of Shaquille Griffin, Sidney Jones, and C.J. Henderson, last year's first-round pick. that's very long on talent and very short on consistency. Like, you can definitely picture a world where those guys come together as one and become a really good cornerback trio. On the other hand, last season, Sidney Jones was the only member of that cornerback group in Jacksonville that wasn't beaten for a passer rating over 100. For as good as Sidney Jones and C.J. Henderson are in terms of ball skills and being able to make plays at the catch point, they combined for 13 pass breakups, which Shaquille Griffin has exceeded twice in a single season. So Griffin brings a much higher propensity to actually disrupt plays at the catch point and cause problems for receivers. I do like the group. I really like that trio as a potential fit, but it's risky in terms of like the chances of all three of those guys coming good in the same year at the same time feels like a stretch. But I like the gamble.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like their draft, as you said, with C.J. Henderson, right? It's like, yeah, it could work, it could not work. You know, do we see a Jalen Ramsey, A.J. Boye type of season out of them? I don't know if we get there, but it's like the potential's in there, right? So overall, I like where the Jags are going. I'm not trying to be completely positive about everything, but I think the Jags got better here. And I like some of those underrated defensive line moves. Indianapolis Colts, this shouldn't take long. They re-signed Marlon Mack for 1 year, $2 million, coming off an injury.
Don't forget they just announced a big move for a quarterback yesterday.
Oh, yes. They also they traded for that guy Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
We've discussed this enough. I mean, we're not getting into the my favorite thing about this show is we're not getting bogged down in quarterback talk. We can definitely get bogged down in QB stuff. We get to talk about the Roy Robertson-Harris defensive line moves, but the Wentz stuff we could
the Colts
talk about another day.
Yeah, the Colts, with the regime they have right now, are the classic the wait and see team. They wait until the second wave of free agency, which we haven't really hit yet, to make their few targeted, specific key moves and add some talent. Now,
despite the third most cap space right now.
Yeah, but that's why they have that, because they aren't deploying it like that. They're using their cap space on their own players and to make huge moves like trading for DeForest Buckner every now and again. Now, they didn't make the splash that we suggested would be wise or might be wise in getting Trent Williams. He re-signed in San Francisco. We'll get to that in the NFC show. I think, though, that they still have this glaring need at left tackle. A lot of people expect them to address that in the draft, but in the draft, the Colts are picking 21st. You'll probably have a tackle available, but you don't know which one, and I don't know if they value all those guys the same. Waiting that long to secure your left tackle of the future when you have a quarterback in Carson Wentz who needs protection desperately, I think is a risk. So the Colts, to me, might be a team that waits until that second wave of free agency and signs a guy like Villanueva, someone that will give you average to below average to just passable play at left tackle and at least ensures that you don't have a catastrophe there if your first-round rookie is a train wreck.
Ali Villanueva or Russell Okung,
yeah,
I think would get to the same results. When I did do the article a few weeks ago on Quentin Nelson and what they should do from using WAR, should they move him to left tackle? When I workshopped all of the potential solutions, that is the best one. It is a Quentin Nelson or Quentin Nelson at left guard plus Villanueva or Okung, that type of tackle, or you go to the draft. The draft, though, the range of outcomes is much wider because you don't know what you're going to get from that rookie. So Okung or Villanueva, absolutely the play there. The other thing, too, just because they have money doesn't mean they're going to go full Patriots and just throw it all out there on day one. Will Fuller, still out there. Haven't mentioned him yet. Antonio Brown, I assume, is going to go back to the Bucs. But, do they – Sammy Watkins, do they need receivers? Do they take some of these second wave receivers and all of a sudden it's like, okay, now you've got some compliments from Michael Pittman and guys for Wentz to throw to?
Absolutely. I think that's what they're going to be doing. They have a couple of fairly key needs. They're needy at left tackle, at wide receiver, and they could use a cornerback. I think they would be wise to take a shot in the second wave at each one of those positions. It'll be interesting to see where Will Fuller's market is, given the fact that the wide receivers have been slow to sign so far, and the ones that haven't necessarily gone for huge money. Will Fuller's a really intriguing player. They might end up bringing T.Y. Hilton back. I get asked every week on Indie Radio, are they going to bring him back? Is what's his market going to be like? And they had an offer out to him before free agency, given how slow the wide receiver market is, I would imagine that offer is no longer on the table, or at least is less than it was when it was first offered. It still might be his best destination, is to just take whatever's on the table and go back. So either way, I think they will add a receiver in this second wave, and then cornerback would be a big add as well.
You ready for the Houston Texans?
Oh, God.
I feel like I need to go full list radio here and read out their moves.
They have made all of the moves.
Should I read all of them?
Oh, okay, sure.
Signed Mark Ingram, 1 year, $3 million. Signed Christian Kirksey, 1 year, 4.5. Re-signed Vernon Hargraves to a 1-year contract. Signed Justin Britt, 1 year, 3.2. Signed Andre Roberts, 2 years, $6 million. Signed KGL, that's the KGH, that's the linebacker, who's a great coverage linebacker. 1 year, $3.25 million. Traded for Marcus Cannon. Traded Benardrick McKinney for Shaq Lawson. Cut. JJ Watt. Malik Collins, 1 year, $6 million. Signed Terrence Brooks, 1 year, $2 million. Justin McCray, 2 years, $4 million. Joe Thomas, 1 year, $2 million. Kevin Pierre-Louis, 2 years, $8 million. Tyrod Taylor, 1 year, $6 million. Terrence Mitchell, 2 years, $7.5 million. Really broke the bank for that one. Tavir Thomas, 2-year contract. This is a championship team just rounding out their roster, Sam.
They have re-signed one player and acquired 14, and I don't know that they're any better. This is the most New England free agency that anybody has had in the NFL, including New England this year. This is exactly what, if this was done by any team that wasn't a train wreck already, you would be like, this is great business. They have signed a bunch of players that I think do actually, they are better players. They are upgrades over what they already had on the roster, but they're such small, insignificant upgrades compared with the holes in this team that it doesn't do anything. It's rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic without fixing the giant hole in the side of the ship that the iceberg caused. It's just not. It's not stopping you sinking to the bottom of the ocean.
The thing I wonder about this is when Bill Belichick describes Nick Caserio, it's Nick Caserio is the pro personnel guy there. He's the guy who knows everybody around the league, every last special teamer, every fourth string defensive tackle. I know there's other people around the league that do this, but I'm just saying that was Caserio's specialty. And I think that was part of what made New England really good, right? New England, in addition to having Tom Brady, the last 10 or so spots of their roster were always filled with somebody who at least had a role or had something to do, or if they had to step in, they had a skill that the Patriots could tap into. So this is kind of Caserio's skill set. But I think the point is, this will, when the basics of the roster are getting better, these moves will make more of an impact.
But when is that going to happen, and how is it going to happen? This is the thing.
You got to get the foundation a little bit stronger, I think.
If this team was already in a really good shape, I would love this free agent period. They haven't spent much money. They've got a lot of players that should materially be better than the players they're replacing. But again, when are you actually going to address the core of the team, which is the weakness? This is like making decisions on amazing, plaster work or cornices in the corner of a building that's still lying in ruin without structure to it. It's just a foundation piece on the bottom in terms of a quarterback. Nobody has built the walls yet, and we're trying to decide between fancy plaster work over the fireplace. What are we doing here? This is just wasting everybody's time.
Well, here's what I would argue, right? Deshaun Watson being let's assume Deshaun Watson's the quarterback for a minute here. Let's assume for a minute here.
Okay.
Him going 4-12 last year, them going 4-12 is rare for a quarterback playing that well. Are they looking at this saying, we expect Deshaun Watson to be here, which immediately gives us a baseline of being good, right? We're immediately contenders in the AFC South because we have Deshaun Watson.
They're not, though.
The defense is what really needs the overhaul. The defense is what really needs the overhaul. Yeah. And they could still do that. They don't have the draft capital, but they could still make some moves there, and they could still be a second wave player. But right now, they are just getting the fringe pieces of the roster. I mean, they filled out roster spots, 40 through 53 so far,
right,
with these players.
The problem is the first 40. And I think we need to start talking about Deshaun Watson as being a part of Houston's past. Somebody made the point.
Probably, yes.
Was it John McClain?
Yes, he continues to push that they are.
Well, he continues to say that he's gone, but somebody made the point that they haven't said that they haven't denied that they will trade him since January. So, this first came up and it's like, Deshaun Watson will not be traded. He is Houston's quarterback. They have not denied that he will be traded since January. And they've had plenty of opportunities to come out and say that, right? They've had guys on the record since then. John McCain, is it McCain or McLean? McLean. John McClain, famed Houston beat writer, says he thinks it's going to happen. I mean, I've been saying for a while I think it's going to happen. I just don't think you can piece this back together. So if Deshaun Watson is gone, okay, you're going to have a ton of draft capital, presumably. But that leaves you without any foundation pieces on this team. Like, you are literally... you've got, the house isn't even there anymore. At that point, you just have a vacant lot. And you've signed all these, you've made all these decisions about the plaster work and the furniture and all the things that go last in the building. The building is not there anymore. You just have a patch of ground with nothing built on it. Like, what are you doing?
I don't know. I think Casario's doing what he knows from a move standpoint. And then I think there still is hope that they'll have Watson. I think they don't want to trade him.
I think they're just building this roster backwards. They're addressing all of the finishing pieces to a roster without having the primary pieces that you need in order to have a roster in the first place. And
they need playmakers on defense. There's no doubt about it.
You need playmakers on defense. Okay, you're kind of hamstrung by the fact that your quarterback wants out and you don't have a viable alternative right now, so that's a problem. But you also need some more playmakers because they've all departed the building pretty much. You just everything they've done is not what this team needs, and they need the other things.
All right, let's wrap it up in the AFC South with the Tennessee Titans. Their moves scare me a little bit. I'm not saying they can't get out of it. I think, I'm trying to think, like last year at this time, we're looking at the Vikings, right? And they trade Stephon Diggs, and it's like, man, you just had one of the best receiver tandems in the league, and you trade Diggs, and they, in the draft, replaced him with Justin Jefferson, and it's, okay, there's a wash there, if not better, with what Jefferson is on a rookie contract. Again, though, you don't want to be like, hey, man, we really got to hit on wide receiver 2 in the draft, and 3.
Yep.
We really got to hit on a starting corner in the draft. Like, the Titans are, for a back-to-back playoff team, really cutting it close here. So what they've done, Corey Davis is out. Jonnu Smith is out. They're 2 top pass catchers on the free agent market. It's A.J. Brown and Cameron Batson and a whole bunch of guys that aren't really impact players. So they've got to get receivers. They bring back Anthony Ferkser, so there's a tight end. But then cornerback, release Adoree Jackson, release Malcolm Butler. They're 2 starters. Adoree's the guy that's been injured, that maybe the NFL, we're due over $10 million. They just don't want to deal with that. Malcolm Butler has played well, man. He's been a pretty good player. He's coming off a decent season. So 2 legitimate starters. They replace one with Janoris Jenkins, a little bit older, a little bit more consistent, maybe more durable, and that's their reasoning there. Christian Fulton's the other starting corner. We liked him last year. We liked him coming out, 2nd-round pick. We thought he was a first-rounder. 56th grade last year. You're relying on him. That's fine. But they need more depth at corner. They need more playmakers. I mean, it's really that simple. And I think their season hinges on these next few weeks and finding those players.
Yeah, they have done. The Vikings was a good comparison. They've left themselves a very small window to hit. It's a very difficult landing to have to stick. It doesn't mean they can't do it, but it's always, when you put yourself in that position, it's hard. Because now you have to achieve something very difficult to do and hit on a specific group of players. And the draft is the crapshoot is the stereotypical term, the cliche, but it isn't wrong. It's very difficult to consistently draft well, particularly when you need to. It's shrinking your margin for error here. Like, it's one thing to have to hit on a certain percentage of draft picks just overall. To have to hit on specific draft picks because you have desperate needs and holes that need to be plugged is really hard. Adoree Jackson to Janoris Jenkins, I think, is another example of what we were talking about before of they hate injuries. Adoree Jackson is a better player than Janoris Jenkins in every possible way except being on the field.
Availability.
Yes. Your best ability is availability. And Janoris will be available for you. But he won't be as good as the guy that would have been. We were talking about this on the live show yesterday, and you can look at Adoree Jackson basically didn't play last year. So you can look at that one of 2 ways. You can look at it and say, hey, this year we basically get a free agent in Adoree Jackson coming back. Him returning to the starting lineup is like a free Pro Bowl caliber player that we don't have to budget for. He's already here, and we get him back. It's a bonus. Or you can say, well, he didn't play last year, so to hell with him. We need to get him off the roster and replace him with a guy who can come in and be on the field. And they've taken the second way. And I think, assuming he isn't one of these players that's just perennially broken and a complete write-off, I think you might be smarter looking at it the first way and saying, hey, look, we're going to get a player back.
They'd already picked up his fifth-year option.
Well, that's the other part of it, yeah.
Right, he was due over $10 million. But it just leaves you with a massive hole. And look, I just think there's pass the ball, stop the pass, all right? We're repeating ourselves over and over again. I just look at their secondary. Kevin Byard's good. Amani Hooker's shown some flashes. He could be okay. I think he replaces Kenny Vaccaro just fine as the starter at safety. There's just a lot of pressure on Christian Fulton. They have no actual slot corner. And the thing I keep going back to is the Titans with Marcus Mariota at QB were consistently this 9-7 caliber team, in part because they had a trio in the secondary that kept them in games. Malcolm Butler, Adoree', Logan Ryan. And they've gotten worse there.
Yep.
And now the other parts of the offensive, having A.J. Brown and Ryan Tannehill step up has offset that. But you want both in sequence. If they're going to make a championship run, you need the passing attack, you need the pass defense. And both have gotten worse this offseason.
Well, the pass defense has not guaranteed to be getting worse.
It's just riskier.
Yeah. So Janoris Jenkins, I mean, if Adoree' Jackson got injured again, Janoris Jenkins would be better than what they had last year. Also, Janoris Jenkins does have a season in his career where he's been at that level. It's just that it was like 1 year, 5 years ago. So potentially they aren't worse there. Also, you get Christian Fulton coming back, and that was a big part of what that defense should have been. So again, in theory, you can paint a scenario whereby they got better, but you're now relying on Christian Fulton coming in and playing well. You're now relying on Janoris Jenkins being an upgrade over what was there before, which isn't necessarily going to happen if Adoree' Jackson was going to come back as opposed to be injured again. So it's definitely a risky thing. And then as you pointed out on the offensive side of the ball, your receivers, you now need to go and draft somebody who is as good in year one as Corey Davis, which is definitely doable. I mean, look at the track record of wide receivers taken in the first couple of rounds the past few years. It's not that difficult to do, but you now need to do it. You don't have margin for error anymore. You can't swing and miss.
The other hole, too, is Dennis Kelly gets released, right tackle, because of the Isaiah Wilson thing. So right tackle, receiver.
Which was a hole all last season
corner.
Because of Isaiah Wilson.
All right, let's get to the AFC West. I just tweeted it out. The people are here. They're live watching us, Sam. We appreciate everybody that's here live on YouTube, or if you're listening, wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget, Free Agency 30, Free Agency 30. You get 30% off all of our PFF subscriptions. Elite is the thing to get right now. Edge, of course, is awesome with the draft guide. QB Annual, everything that you get there. But Elite's the way to go, fellas, especially with all premium stats. If you're a Texans fan and you want to know about those 15 players you signed, we have data on all of them in premium stats, part of PFF Elite. Let's start with the Chiefs, defending Super Bowl champs. Joe Thuney, they break the bank there. You mentioned to me last night off air, they may have offset it with the Kyle Long signing. 1 year, $5 million, right?
Yes, I think so. Joe Thuney's a great player, was the sort of star of free agency from an interior offensive line point of view. The Chiefs needed to rebuild that offensive line. They paid to do it. That is one of the biggest sort of overpay contracts in this free agency period for Thuney. But I think they absolutely, if you look at it in tandem with the Kyle Long deal, Kyle Long signs for 1 year, $5 million. Okay, they'd have to re-up him next year if he plays well. But those two together this year, I think, becomes a very moderate and good tandem and good value tandem. Kyle Long, look at the history of offensive linemen that have taken a sabbatical for whatever reason. They've all come back and played really well. I think people used to talk about offensive line play being like getting in a car crash every Sunday. You just go out there, you smash your face into a guy 50 times a game, and just have to live with the consequences of that in your body. And the guy you were smashing your face into weighs 300 pounds. Like, it's literally like being in a traumatic road accident every single week. That has to have some kind of like just attritional toll on your body every year. So offensive linemen, more than a lot of positions, I think, to just take a year off, get out of there, go sit on a beach for a couple of months, work on rehab, get 100% healthy, work everything out, get fit, all those things, then come back at it again from a position of 100% health, not from like the starting point of 75% health and then chipping away at that through the season, I think it's a really good thing for them. Kyle Long, back in the day, before injuries started to chip away at his play, was a really good offensive lineman and a sort of physically freaky one as well. A guy with incredible, a lot like Lane Johnson at right tackle, just a physically really impressive player who could play at a really high level. I think he's a guy that got healthy a year ago, or with his year off, could immediately be one of the better offensive linemen in the league for not much money at all.
The benefit of being live here is that when I misspeak, people will
correct you.
Yeah.
Huh.
The Chiefs are not the defending Super Bowl champs.
They're not.
Idiot,
No.
Steve.
Yeah.
Sorry.
They lost.
My apologies.
Lost bad.
Defending AFC
was
champions. It's not 2019.
No.
So my apologies to the live crew there. Anyway, the Chiefs, do you think, again, we go back to this, the Super Bowl is going to dictate their offensive line strategy. Are they looking at this and saying, we're going to invest at guard because that's the way we want to protect Mahomes? Think about how Mahomes maneuvers the pocket. He feels edge pressure. He steps up and in and around. And do they feel like maybe they can be weaker at tackle, but they need to shore up the interior?
What if
or is it just the way the market is, and they think we can draft tackles rather than drafting guards?
What if Kyle Long is the right tackle?
Oh.
2014 was so he's had 3 seasons in his PFF career with a pass blocking grade above 80. 2 seasons in which he didn't give up a sack. His best year came as right guard. The following year, 2015, he played right tackle and was pretty good. I don't know that Kyle Long is necessarily their guard.
You know what their best case scenario is, though?
What?
Mitchell gets healthy, wants to play. Grab him for 1 year, $6 million or something like that.
Sure.
I'm sure he would want to go back to Kansas City.
Joe Tooney is going to be their left guard. Left tackle is still a question mark. Right guard, Laurent Duvernay-Tardif is apparently coming back. He has said he is.
Yep. Lucas Niang is still there. He was a developmental prospect. We said that was a great third-round pick, anticipating the future there at tackle. So he's in the mix.
But it's very in the mix, I think is a good way of putting it. I know a lot of Chiefs fans are just penciling him in as right tackle, done. But this guy was taken at the bottom of the 3rd round. Right. And as much as you might like that for value, expecting him to be good is probably a stretch.
If you read the PFF draft guide last year, Mike Renner's comments, he needs his entire pass set, footwork, everything just started from scratch.
Yeah.
So, yes, there are absolutely
So he might be fine,
questions.
but I don't think you can rely on that being a plus position of play heading into this year. He's definitely in the mix. But if he's fighting with Kyle Long to start, maybe Kyle Long wins that job and starts at right tackle. Otherwise, I mean, is Kyle Long your swing player? Do they release Larry Duvernay-Tardif? Does he get cut?
So you're saying because Larry's there, you think Long?
I just think he's in the mix at right tackle as well. I think at his best, when he was healthy, he was a pretty good right tackle, and they currently have an open space at right tackle, whereas they have a reasonable guard coming back into the picture.
So that's all they've done pretty much so far, the Chiefs. Obviously had to cut Mitchell Schwartz and Eric Fisher, and who knows, maybe Fisher ends up coming back on the cheap as well. But either way, I think they need to anticipate the future at tackle in the draft. Another team that you don't want to leave that hole, but it might be there. What about on the defensive side of the ball? Because they're going to lose Brashad Breeland. L'Jarius Sneed is back. Travarius Ward back, but you still want to add some corner depth, and you'd probably like to have a dynamic pass rusher opposite Frank Clark to go with Chris Jones. They
were apparently pretty hard into the Trent Williams sweepstakes before the 49ers made him the monster deal that he couldn't turn down.
But I think they obviously couldn't get Trent Williams and Joe Tooney.
Sure.
But so either way, they were saying we want one of the elite offensive linemen in this class.
Yeah, and they have restructured a lot of deals to move money around. The Patrick Mahomes deal still puts him on an extremely small number this year in terms of cap hit. I wouldn't rule out the concept that the Chiefs have money to play with to make a bigger move than people expect from them. And one of these guys that's still unsigned or hasn't had a strong enough market compared to what they thought they would have ends up playing in Kansas City, who I think still have that draw of chase a ring here. Okay, it didn't work out last year, but the Chiefs and the Bucs are the two teams where if you're chasing a ring, you're playing for one of those two teams.
Oh, absolutely. So they do have that. They do have that allure. We'll talk about it plenty this offseason. Are we concerned about the receiver situation in Kansas City? Sammy Watkins is out, and it's not that he's the massive loss. It's this whole idea of having a third option. If you're trying to build a championship team, filling every hole, third receiving option behind Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce has to be a major priority. And this is the issue with rebuilding the offensive line. You have to go whack-a-mole over here to forget about wide receiver 3, which might be a bigger long-term issue.
Yeah, but it's a much better place to be than Tennessee, who need wide receiver 2
True.
and tight end. Like they're not in a bad spot, but it is an issue. It's a position they need to attack, but they don't have to 100% nail it. You know what I mean?
Watch them get Will Fuller.
Right. So they can pick up a guy in the second wave of free agency. They can draft a receiver in the first couple of rounds. And whilst it would be great if they hit on that guy, it doesn't cripple them if they don't. So, yeah, they have work to do in that area, but I don't think they're in a similar spot to a team like Tennessee, who not only needs to attack it, but actually needs to hit on it. Otherwise, they have problems.
Let's go Las Vegas Raiders. All of a sudden, their offensive line. Did you see the thing I sent you about the old ESPN commercial?
I didn't look at it. What was it?
This is one of my favorite old school commercials. It's Derek Carr's rookie season's 2002. He gets sacked 76 times.
David Carr.
Sorry. Because there's correlation here. It's the Carrs. He gets sacked 76 times. So prior to the 2003 draft, the commercial for the draft is, they show a clip and, Derek Carr comes up to the line and
David Carr.
David Carr comes up to the line. And there's no line there. It's just nobody's there. It's just like a big blank thing.
I remember that commercial.
And over the top, it's ESPN. It's like, what does your team need? Tune into the draft type of thing.
I remember that.
And then somebody tweeted that joke for Derek Carr yesterday. Like, here's his offensive line. And it's just a big blank. Nobody. Here's your depth chart.
Yeah.
And I was like, look at this. 18 years later, that was the David Carr actual ESPN commercial. So the Raiders offensive line this year, Trent Brown starting tackle, traded. Gabe Jackson, we thought might get released. He gets traded. Rodney Hudson was going to get released, the starting center. He gets traded. And then Richie Incognito released. The Raiders worked so hard. 3 years ago, we were having this discussion with the Raiders. They had no offensive line, and they did such great work to make it one of the league's best by bringing in Gabe Jackson, by bringing in Rodney Hudson, a couple other moves at the time that were good. And now they're just starting from scratch again.
Yeah, Richie Incognito says he's back with the Raiders.
Oh, okay.
Though I don't know that was tremendously well backed up by other sources yet. So, Palazzolo says he's re-signing as well to a one-year deal. But
okay,
anyway.
so that's good. Colton Miller made some great strides at left tackle. Andre James is slotted in at center right now. He has not performed well in his.
I think we owe it to people to document how not well Andre James has played. So let me give you the.
Per PFF IQ?
No. Well, you can do that as well, but let me give you first the context of what they're replacing in terms of Rodney Hudson.
Yes.
Rodney Hudson has been the best pass blocking center of the past decade by a reasonable distance. He has 6 seasons in which he's given up fewer single-digit pressures over a season. So 6 years in which he's given up single digits.
Single digits is insane.
5 years in which he hasn't given up a sack. 3 more years, in which he's given up 1 sack. He has given up 10 sacks in 10 years, 5 of which came in 1 season, right? So in 9 years, he's given up 5 sacks, essentially. Rodney Hudson is like the textbook best pass blocker in the NFL at center. He's got 2 years in which he gave up 3 pressures each year. 1 more year in between that where he gave up 5. Like, his numbers are just absurd, absolutely ridiculous as a pass blocking center. There was a 3-year stretch in which he gave up 11 pressures.
That's 3 weeks for some centers.
That's madness. Yeah. That's absolutely nuts. They are replacing him with.
So Andre James played a little tackle at UCLA. We saw him play about 120 snaps or so in 2019. PFF IQ, the next generation of PFF products for NFL team clients. Hit me up if you guys are listening, front office folks. IQ is a great way of just sorting what a player is, what they're going to be, and valuing them. So, and we put it into percentiles here. So Andre James on 120 snaps, 0th percentile pass blocking grade.
The what now?
0th.
Yeah,
It's a small sample size, but 0th, worst.
Yeah.
Last in pass blocking grade, run blocking grade on gap runs, run blocking grade on zone runs. Sometimes you put him out on an island on a true pass set, and that's, the biggest challenge as a pass blocker. He's last there. And then sometimes you protect him with play action or with three-step concepts or against a three-man rush. He's last there on those three things as well. So very small. He is 99th percentile, though, in avoiding negatively graded plays in the run game. So
they are said to
a very small sample, but it was just funny seeing this breakdown.
Yeah, they are said to love him. Like it's they love Andre James, so they were prepared to get rid of Rodney Hudson to put him in there. He has one start at center, and that one start generated a PFF pass blocking grade of 0.
That's the 0th percentile.
That is the 0th percentile. 0.0. That is literally as bad as it gets, and that's the player they're putting in there. Now, look, it's one game early in his career. Who the hell knows? Maybe he'll be good, but it's just kind of funny that you're like, yeah, we're perfectly prepared to move on from the best pass blocking center over the past decade and replace him with a guy who, when he was last starting a game at center, had a pass blocking grade of 0.
I just think it's one of the stories of this offseason that there are teams like the Raiders, the Chiefs, the Steelers, teams who all had good offensive lines last year that have a complete turnover.
Yeah.
And you don't know exactly what you're going to get. So it's just it's the same thing we're talking about. The Titans and their secondary and at receiver. Not every roster is filled here. There's plenty of time. There's a draft. There's second wave of free agency. But right now there are just massive question marks at a lot of these units, and the Raiders' offensive line, absolutely one of them.
It's also, though, a weird situation where, again, like sometimes these moves that teams make smack an awful lot of not really having a coherent strategy in place, right? So they cut Richie Incognito and re-sign him later. Okay, that makes some sense in this world of shrinking cap, and let's just try and get people back on a cheaper contract number than they were on. We are prepared to expose this guy to the open market on the basis that we think we'll be able to bring him back for cheaper, and we're not that sad if he departs and we don't get him back. So that makes sense. It was reported that they were cutting both Rodney Hudson and Gabe Jackson, only to later trade them.
Now, Hudson apparently wanted out.
Sure, but the point is, it was reported that they had cut both those guys and then, like, presumably discovered that you could actually get something back for them in a trade. Typically, when it's leaked that a guy is getting cut, they're not getting traded for anything more than like a 7th-round pick. Rodney Hudson got a 3rd-round pick back, which means there were multiple teams in on that. Like, you don't get a 3rd-round pick back if it's just one team. They had multiple teams on the phone being like, dude, if you're going to cut that guy, we will send you a pick for him. Send him over here. And Gabe Jackson ends up being traded for the Seahawks as well. Similar kind of deal. Like, what are they doing that they didn't realize you could trade these guys in the first place?
No, I think that's how you do it though, Sam. Because
it's not.
Yes, it is, because the league year hadn't started yet.
Yeah.
So trades aren't going to be official. You leak that guys are going to get released, and then teams start calling.
No,
I think
you get on the phone and you're like, hey, this guy might be available. If you
send out the mass email.
Yeah. You don't
put
say
put him on your fantasy leagues.
You don't say we're cutting this guy, but would you please give us something in return before we do? Because then all you're getting back is a 7th-round pick. You get on the phone and you say, hey, the best pass blocking center in the NFL, we might be prepared to move on because we don't love the guy's contract. What would you give up for that guy?
Let me give the Raiders the benefit of the doubt here too. Gabe Jackson and Rodney Hudson both coming on. So Gabe Jackson's coming off his 2 worst graded seasons. So he was good from 2014 to 18, graded in the green every single year.
His career is upside down.
It is upside down. So he's just a name at this point. And yes, he was one of the guys that was a big part of the turnaround. Like, they got him friends when they turned around this offensive line a couple years ago. He's coming off his 2 worst seasons. Rodney Hudson, for all of the accolades that you just listed, coming off his worst season last year, his worst pass blocking season, his lowest grade either ever or in a long time. So, do we actually give the Raiders credit for moving on at the right time and actually getting a 3rd-rounder back for Rodney Hudson, who is in decline? And I do think when we talk Cardinals and NFC, we're going to look at one of the best moves, because that, and they've shored up their offensive line there potentially. Are they getting out at the right time here, even though they are leaving what looks like some gaping holes? They did sign Denzel Good to come back. He's played worse than Gabe Jackson, but are they at least getting out of veterans at the right time here?
I would give them credit if I didn't think that the 3rd-round pick they got back was an accident that happened after they had decided they were releasing him, and then somebody got on the phone and said, don't do that. We'll give you a trade. And more than one team did that, because otherwise it wouldn't have been a 3rd-round pick. And so the other thing is, In isolation, none of these moves is bad. I think the point you make is fair, which is all of these guys have shown signs of decline and are of an age where you might think about moving on from them, or have a contract that you might think of moving on from them, whatever. You can make the case that any single one of them is the right move to make, but you just can't turn over that percentage of an offensive line in any one season. You can't do it. The chemistry of a group, of a homogenous unit on the offensive line is too important to dump them all at the same time and try and replace. It's too hard. You can't do it like that. So I don't think you can give them credit for making the right moves when you needed to stagger this, is what I'm saying. If you were going to make these moves, all right, somebody needs to get in a room a year ago and be like, this entire offensive line is going to need to be turned over in the next 2 years. Let's start planning how we're going to do that. Let's make one move now. Let's take one move next year. Let's take the next move in a year and a half's time. Now we can do this whole thing in stages, and the offensive line will remain fine throughout the entirety of it. Now you've just jettisoned 3/5 of a good offensive line and are plugging it in with what? Like, that's not a strategy.
They're another team that might go into the draft and looking for a tackle in the first round among all those first-round potential tackles, because Brandon Parker right now is slated to play at right tackle. I also wonder if they're just like, man, this is year 3 of the Mayock-Gruden regime, right? Or 4? 3?
Into 4, right? It'll be the 4th.
But is this them trying to get their guy, the Andre James of the world, the Denzel Goods who they brought in, and Brandon Parker who they drafted? Are they trying to get them like, all right, guys, time to go play?
I mean, maybe.
It's risky.
They don't have a great track record of putting in players.
This is the perils of team building, right? We thought that the Raiders were going all in on defense. It sounded like that was the case. Whack-a-mole again, right? Now they have to fix this offensive line all the while. Defensively, they're saying they need some alphas, they need some guys, and they haven't gotten anything yet other than Yannick Ngakoue. And Ngakoue, again, I think he's an overrated pass rusher, but a good fit for Gus Bradley, for this system, with what else they have in Max Crosby and Cleveland Ferrell and Maurice Hurst. I think the line's getting better there, and Ngakoue makes it better. The secondary is still the biggest concern here.
I think top to bottom, the Raiders have just they are right now living the consequences of a failure to acquire talent in the past couple of years, both in the draft and free agency. They haven't, the moves they've made have missed, and so they're still trying to patch over these holes that should have been fixed a couple of years ago. Like, you trade away a Khalil Mack. Okay, the numbers would say the trade you did was the correct one, but the pieces you then pulled in to replace him didn't work out, and you haven't had plus play at that position. Now you're trying to fix it with a one-dimensional pass rusher in Yannick Ngakoue, who you hope will provide the speed off the edge that you haven't really had since Khalil Mack.
Yeah, sorry, 2019 was Mayock's first year there.
You bring in a John Brown, which I really like as a move. I think that's the best move they've made. But John Brown potentially replaces what you lost in Nelson Aguilar, who was a surprise occupant of the role that Henry Ruggs was supposed to have, which is he's your designated deep threat, the guy that provides Derek Carr the capacity to scare teams deep down the field and be a good offense. Without that, the Raiders' offense is a lot more predictable, and Derek Carr is a lot more easy to defend, and they don't scare anybody. Suddenly you have a deep threat, and everything changes. That was supposed to be Henry Ruggs. That's why he went number 11 overall, above CeeDee Lamb, above Jerry Jeudy, above Justin Jefferson, above all those other first-rounders. He was the guy to provide that, and he didn't. Aguilar had more than twice the number of deep touchdowns. He had three times the number of touchdowns, twice the number of deep catches. He was the guy. John Brown could be that guy this year, which means like 3 years into it, you still don't know if you have anything in Henry Ruggs. This is an embodiment of what happens if you swing and a miss a bunch of times on talent.
I'm not too worried about what you're saying here. I'm not too worried about Ruggs and John Brown being redundant. I mean, you can use Ruggs any way you want.
Okay, but they haven't yet.
Yeah, but you can't. Like, they used him as a deep threat at times. They used him a little, maybe too much as Tyreek Hill, gimmicky type player or whatever it is. But I think they'll be fine here. They will be fine. I think the Raiders, though, just like their drafts, I go from like, yeah, I agree, to like, I don't like that. I just go back and forth between yes and no, and I feel like some of their moves here similar. We got the Chargers and let's discuss the Denver Broncos. They just released Phillip Lindsay too, huh?
Yeah.
That's a local favorite there.
So 32 rookie wide receivers had 10 or more targets last season. Would you like to know where Henry Ruggs ranked in terms of PFF grade?
Yeah.
28th.
Yikes.
Not good, Bob. I'm
Will
just saying.
Fuller effect. Will Fuller effect.
The guy runs a 4-2. There's a role for him in an NFL offense. We haven't seen it yet. And if John Brown occupies his role, they need to figure out what they're going to do with him.
Guy's fast. He's going to be fine.
Yeah? How's that working out for John
Love
Ross?
speed guys. All right. They'll figure out Ruggs. They'll be fine. They'll be fine with Ruggs. Raiders still have some work to do defensively. Denver Broncos, another team that's been somewhat quiet, but I like the two things that they've done. I kind of like the two things they've done. Shelby Harris coming back.
I like that.
Batted pass machine. One of our most underrated free agents. Ronald Darby is in my, Ronald Darby and Jason Verrett. Just replay the last 5 years of free agency podcast, guys. We love Jason Verrett and Ronald Darby. On 1 and 2 year deals is the thing. Ronald Darby reminds me a lot of a guy that actually played for Vic Fangio a couple years ago, Prince Amukamara. Very similar, where it's like when healthy, went out on the field, played for multiple teams, and mostly been productive.
The Mike Renner broke the news that Pro Bowl fullback Nick Bellore will be staying put and re-signing with Seattle, per source. For those listeners that don't know, Mike is buddies with Nick Bellore, so I suspect that's his source.
I'm going to ask what his source is.
But critically, Ian Rappaport has quote tweeted Mike with the news.
No.
He has. Seattle gets his fullback back.
Come on.
Mike is the source. He's broken the news. He is the newsbreaker at PFF now.
Oh my God.
Granted, his sources may be limited to
source ?
Breaking news about Nick Bellore. But yeah, he got quote tweeted by the rap sheet.
This is amazing. Nick Bellore is back. So there you go, Russ. Look, this is some big news. We don't want to wait for the NFC podcast here tomorrow. I like how Renner added his own. He added his own commentary too. Huge get for the Seahawks in their pursuit to appease franchise QB Russell Wilson.
Water carrying like all the rest of them.
Is he a special teams ace as well? Mike, if you want to be full insider, you have to call him a special teams ace. Or is that diminishing his value as an offensive weapon? How do you do that for your friend Nick Bellore?
I think that's diminishing the value. You've got to pitch him as an offensive superstar first.
Former linebacker turned offensive weapon fullback, Nick Bellore. Well, this has really hijacked the entire podcast. We were cruising, too. We were on pace for
just
we're
a little
over
bit.
2 hours.
Come on.
Whoops, there goes the table. All right, what are we wrapping up here? We've got the Chargers to get to as well, and the Broncos. What are your thoughts on the Ronald Darby deal? I like Darby in low-risk situations. 3 years, over $10 million a year is a little bit riskier for a guy that's been a little up and down. I also, from a system standpoint, Fangio's a little bit off coverage, a little bit more zone, quarters type of look. I like Darby just straight up in your face playing man coverage. I don't know about the fit.
Yeah, I don't love the fit, but I do think this is a good defense and a good coach, and that will help. And he won't. They have some players there as well. Remember, like Denver's secondary this year got absolutely eviscerated. They had a cornerback crisis. Everybody they had got hurt. Even players that were like moonlighting in different positions ended up getting hurt. But you bring in a Ronald Darby, you get Bryce Callahan back, who was one of the best slot corners in the NFL, had to play outside and did pretty well. Suddenly you've got a couple of pieces in there. You've still got the draft to come. I like what they're building, and I think the money is about right. I think that was a decent deal for them to get him in. I agree with you. I'm a little bit skeptical about the scheme fit, but I think if anyone's going to make it work, it will be Fangio.
Still a bit more work to do, I think, on the back end there in Denver. But they bring Von Miller back, too, which I think great.
And re-sign or franchise tag Justin Simmons, which is big.
Franchise tag Justin Simmons, which is excellent. He's a good fit for what they're doing on the back end as well. And he's been really good these last couple of years.
You know what else they did?
What's that?
Free up a lot of salary cap space.
Oh. Setting up for Watson?
Yes. I genuinely think Denver are one of the teams.
Where do you want Deshaun Watson to go the most? If you had your druthers, whatever those are, if you had them, where's Watson going?
Miami 1, Denver 2.
Miami 1?
Yes.
You want to see him in Miami?
Yes.
Or you just think it's the best?
Both. Miami, Watson and Miami, it makes too much freaking sense. Just get it done. They have all the first-round picks and a bunch of second-round picks. They have Tua. They have a playoff-ready roster, a potentially championship-ready roster if they add Deshaun Watson to it. South Beach is fun. There's no tax. Why would that not happen? Just do it.
That has nothing to do with your preference. Like, I want to see Watson in South Beach. Who
it has
cares?
for Watson.
Yes, I'm talking about you. Who does Sam? Sam want to see Deshaun Watson playing football?
I want to see him play in Miami. The move makes too much sense to happen. Just get it done. Anyway, Miami is a great fit for everybody concerned. I want to see it. Do it. Denver, I think, is a great fit as well, and I really want to see the receiving core that they assembled, albeit minus Philip Lindsay now, with Deshaun Watson throwing them the ball. Jerry Jeudy, my guy. Great route runner, translates immediately, ruined by Drew Lock in season 1. KJ Hamler, a potential Tyreek Hill-esque threat as a vertical slot receiver. Cortland Sutton coming back. Tim Patrick still there. The tight ends they have. This is the best receiving core in the NFL on paper if they have a good quarterback throwing them the ball. They haven't. In fact, they've had a crappy quarterback throwing them the ball. Give them Deshaun Watson and finally answer all their problems, right? John Elway has been searching for a quarterback since Peyton Manning. Here it is. Get it done.
I mean, that's why I think that's my favorite fit for Deshaun. I want to see Watson, Mahomes, Herbert, and Carr battle it out in the AFC West. That's what I'm rooting for. Chargers. Let's wrap it up with them. Like some of their moves. They're up. Going back to the offensive line, Corey Linsley at center, Matt Filer, our boy, tackle/guard, Sam. He could play either position. They cut Trey Turner, and they cut Casey Hayward. But Linsley and Filer coming into the offensive line, Michael Davis getting re-signed at corner. Just some decent, solid moves here, I think, for the Chargers.
Yep, I really like both the offensive line additions. Corey Linsley was the best center in the NFL last year by a distance. He gave up 4 pressures in 13 games starting. Was, if anything, better as a run blocker. Like, he's a perfect test for if this thing is just built on an Indian burial ground. If the Chargers' offensive line just has no hope, anything they touch turns to crap. Whatever the reverse of the Midas touch is, the Chargers currently have when it comes to offensive linemen. If Linsley comes in there and plays badly, just forget it. Figure out a way of playing the game with that offensive line because you can't find them. Matt Filer, I think, is a great move. I like him better as a tackle than a guard, but even if they're plugging him in a guard, he should be a fairly significant upgrade over what they have. And I think his floor, in terms of being that upgrade at either position, is very high. So they should have upgraded 2 out of 5 offensive line spots very comfortably, and then signing Michael Davis back is a good move.
It's another offensive line that needed the complete overhaul this year, right?
And that's a problem.
And I think they could complete it with a Rashawn Slater in the draft, potentially. Northwestern left tackle. So left tackle still a major question mark. Brian Bulaga, when healthy, good solid right tackle, and then that frees up Filer to play guard. So there's a path to creep back toward average for the Chargers there. Still could use, for the 19th year in a row, interior pass rush help. And with Casey Hayward on the way out, and Michael Davis is good. He's solid, but it's a less attractive looking secondary than it looked on paper last year, even though it didn't matter. But on paper with Chris Harris and Casey Hayward and Derwin James last year, it was like, man, this is how you attack the Chiefs defensively. But it's a whole new system and one that's predicated on preventing big plays and a little bit more zone. It's zone heavy, but in a different way.
Not if your guy Derwin moves to corner.
If we do have that move.
That. Casey Hayward is another example of, hey, look, you can definitely make the argument that they got out at the right time. He has had a decade's worth almost of like amazing PFF grades, incredible coverage numbers, just phenomenal play. 2019 had a coverage grade of 83. 2020, that dropped all the way to 59.5, by far the worst grade of his career across the board, just bad everywhere. And now he's 31 and a half. He'll be 32 next year. I mean, you can definitely look at that. It would be scary to sort of re-up him and think, yeah, he's definitely going to be fine as a starting corner again. It makes sense, I think, to move on from him.
One of the most difficult things of free agency, this first hit me a couple years ago when we were analyzing it in maybe 2018, and we were like, this guy was good in 2015. If you could get back to 3 years ago, this guy's going to be great. And, of course, that year always moves up. But the tricky part is figuring out, like a Gabe Jackson, who hasn't graded well for us since 2018 now, can you get him back to that point, or is it time to move on? And it's hard for us sometimes to get caught up in Casey Hayward's a big name in PFF world because he's always graded well. Your breakdown, he's always graded well. So did he drop off? Was it a 1-year blip? Do you still have 2 or 3 years left in him? Is he Terrence Newman, or is he guy that's just done, or Josh Norman, right? Whoever, So those things are always tough to figure out. But my theory is always to try to take as many of those flyers as possible if you can get them on the cheap. So there you go. AFC free agency breakdown so far. We're going to be back tomorrow. It's a bonus podcast Friday morning. We'll probably go live again, YouTube. Got over 1,000 people watching us right now on YouTube, Sam. So
no news. Hello. I mean, the closest we got to news was Renner breaking.
Nick Bellore is news. We'll have should we get Renner on the podcast for the full Nick Bellore scouting report for the NFC show tomorrow?
No.
Oh.
I mean, how much time do you want to dedicate to Nick Bellore signing?
At least 10 to 15 seconds.
Okay. Well, yeah, sure. We can get him in for that.
We should call Renner. We'll zoom Renner in for a 10 to 15 second breakdown on his buddy Nick. Maybe how he worked his sources and that whole deal.
Perfect, yeah. Really lift the hood on that mechanism, figure out how it worked.
I want to tell some of the other stuff that we can't get into that. All right. Anyway, it's been great. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. It's our regular Thursday podcast. We'll be back here again tomorrow, breaking down the entire NFC. Don't forget, free agency 30. Go to PFF.com right now. Type in that promo code, 30% off, Edge and Elite. See you guys tomorrow.